We will start out with Liana Toledo with Caloias Tactical Communications.
Perfect. Thanks for the time, Melanie. Just very quickly, just wanted to make everybody aware that there will be upgrades to the OASIS systems in the counties and non-county EOCs across the state. There's going to be an upgrade to hardware. There won't be any change to the functionality. It's just going along with the Alert and Warning Center's modernizing of their just equipment and their systems. Timeline for the replacements is in progress, and we will be able to provide updates at future MARACs and just through your regional communications coordinator as we have project details finalized. So on the slide, if you want to take a quick screenshot of that or your existing regional communications coordinators to reach out to if you have any questions, want any details on upgrades. Again, we'll provide those as they become available. Thanks again for the time, everybody. If anybody has questions, you can send to me in chat or reach out directly to your communications coordinator. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Liana, for that and the presentation. Does anybody have any questions for Liana? All right, hearing none and seeing nothing in the chat, I'll go ahead and get that presentation and send that out to everybody. Thanks again, Liana. We'll move over to UC Davis, Thomas Maiorana, and I apologize if I did not pronounce your last name correctly.
No worries. Yeah, it's Maiorana, like the mayor of a city, but it is like no one gets it on the first try. So no worries. Yeah, so is it okay to get started? Super.
Yes, please.
So yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Maiorana, and I'm a professor at UC Davis. And I want to share with you a board game that I've created that will assist with wildfire evacuations. And so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I'll go through this quickly, and what I'd like to do, are folks able to see it?
Yes, we could see it.
Okay, great. So I'll go through this quickly enough just to give you a sense of what the game is about, and then I'd love to open up if folks have questions, and we'll go from there. So just as background, I'm an associate professor at UC Davis. I am part of this is a National Science Foundation funded project that is led by Kenichi Soga, who is at UC Berkeley, but there's also other team members from Berkeley as well as UC Santa Cruz. But will be funded probably. I have another year of funding approximately for this project. So all that to say, my portion of this is very specific. Our whole team is working on wildfire evacuations and community resilience, but the other team members and professors are working on different elements of it. So Kenichi, for example, works on sensor networks, so understanding how many, what the implications would be if every car left a certain area at a certain time, and very specific modeling of how that might work. I'm coming to it more from the behavioral side. So what does it actually feel like in a community to go through a wildfire evacuation? And so the point of my work is to help tease out insights from the community while teaching them best practices. Just to give you a little background on me, all of this is to say I am a professor at UC Davis. My area of research is prototyping complex systems. What that means is I think of an evacuation as a complex system, and one of the ways to prototype it is by making a game that helps tease out some of the elements of that system in a way that is like far easier and faster to explore than it would be, than doing like a once a year evacuation drill. And then just to show some of these other elements, I've helped conceptualize and launch an institute called The Hive at the Claremont Colleges, as well as kind of launching different products when I was prior to my time as an academic. All that to say is, as an academic, I'm very interested in, really practical impact for communities. So the quick overview of the game. Now, this grant has been going on for a number of years. We really took off in terms of my portion of it last year, or about a year ago. I hosted the first game in Tamales. And so since then, we've done it in over 15 plus communities. The reason I don't have an exact number is that there's a certain amount of games that I've kind of hosted and facilitated, but then in last year in June, we got coverage from KQED and that went national. And so basically I've been getting a lot of requests from people all over the country. And currently I'm in vacation in Oregon, and one of the Oregon Office of Emergency Management has requested a game, and they've been distributing it in different areas. So there's a lot of games out there. I just can't track them all because I'm not facilitating each one of them. So quick overview of the game. It takes approximately 45 to 60 minutes to play and really requires a 15-minute minimum of a facilitated discussion to help lock in the learnings from the game. There's about each group, there's about 5 to 7 people at a table. And so each table would be playing its own game. But I have done it where we've had 6, I think was the maximum number of tables we had going at one time. So even though people are playing, they're having a very different experience because it's for reasons that I'll show you as I get more into the game. The roles that requires for if you were to kind of have this game in a community, basically someone plays the role of the fire, and in this case it's an actual fireman who is in Tamales, but essentially the fire is kind of like the dungeon master or the sort of kind of referee. They basically just kind of control nature in the game, and so they have a slightly different role. But essentially the only real thing they need to know is just that like fire blows down wind, which is as complicated as I'm getting in this game for reasons that I can share with you. But the short answer is it just made the game far more playable. And then everyone else at the table is playing themselves. So they're just, you are acting as you would in real life. And that's part of the value of this, is that it's really helping tease out behaviors so that it locks in the learning in a more embodied way. Here's a number of the game pieces. I have all of this I can share in more detail, and I have a website that I can show you later on. But to give you a quick overview of how the game works, we start with this kind of semi-tax looking form sheet. But this is basically a way of highlighting behaviors that we want to reinforce. And then, so things like you get a bonus at the beginning of the game if you have a go bag or if you have an evacuation plan. You also get a penalty if you're, and this is really a time penalty. It's not behavior we don't want to see, but for instance, if you're evacuating with a large family, you need to account for more time. And so you get a little bit of a penalty, or the same type of thing if you have pets or multiple pets or large livestock, that will kind of increase your penalty score. And really, this is a way of just surfacing things that are in reality going to affect you in evacuation, because it's far better to think of those during a board game when you can then plan for them rather than think about it the first time when you're in the moment of evacuation. Here's one of the versions of the board game. I've simplified this, as you can see later on, but essentially the key difference here is that the best versions of these are ones where I've recreated a map of the local community. So it really kind of creates a sense of like localized stakes and investment from the community members. There's also a generic map I've made that's kind of like representative of different communities, but I found that the actual streets and having it be like where my house is just creates far more engagement. So here's the map. And these, just for context, are about this is about 3 feet by 2 feet roughly. So it's a large map meant to be played at like a large kind of picnic style table. And we start just with the fire creates a random fire location and wind direction. And so each map, as you'll see here, has a grid number on it. So the fire could end up anywhere. And there's a wind direction, and the fire player places the fire on the board. And then there's these day and time spinners. And really what this is meant to do is just to kind of break through the kind of expectations that folks have, where it's like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about evacuation in the abstract, but you might think about it at a convenient time unintentionally. Whereas this is like, oh, wait a minute, on Mondays at 3, I'm at work, but my kid's at school. And so it's introducing some of those complications that folks might not think about without these kind of external mechanics. And then based on, if it's Tuesday at 3 a.m., then you would place your starting piece at like wherever you live on the map. And so that may or may not be convenient based on where the fire is. There's also transportation cards. So this is a way of thinking about like what vehicle would you use to evacuate. And then there's also chance cards, which are played during every turn. And so the idea is that the chance cards will help surface kind of unexpected things that folks might not think about. So for instance, it might be like, well, the cell phone towers are out, so you actually can't communicate with your loved ones. And the idea is having different kind of complexities of the, of a evacuation scenario come to the forefront so folks can start to think like, oh, wait a minute, how would I adjust for that? As well as some typical things of, kind of fire shifting, the heat's up, or there might be bad visibility and different things like that to help people understand what they might be facing. One thing I'll note here is that I have a kind of method for like I print these out as if they're, I was gonna make 1,000 of them. So I have a large quantity of these chance cards that are kind of typical for any sort of fire scenario, but then in more localized situations where you might have like, a particular festival or, a type of event that might actually cause congestion or cause issues, then I've just created a way for communities to print it out on just sticky labels that they can print over a couple of the cards. So basically what happens is folks get set up, the fire happens, they then read a chance card, and that will have impacts on how far they can move. And then they have a little spinner that shows just like how many moves they can make on the map. And then you go around, and many of the, like each round of play, someone will read a chance card. Sometimes the chance card affects the whole community, the whole table. Sometimes it just affects them. Sometimes they're positive. So there's things like if you've, done home hardening, then everyone at the table gets, an extra space. So it's a way to both reinforce positive behaviors and kind of surface kind of negative aspects. And so essentially the goal is to get off the board or get to safety. There's also and usually each round of play, there's about 4 or 5 rounds, depending on how fast people play, how much discussion there is. I tend to really encourage discussion because a lot of times the point is really to get folks to talk with each other and learn from each other, as well as surface issues that they might share with like the community leaders. But the idea is they'll go around and then the fire gets to play. So that also adds the kind of complexity of, sometimes the winds change or sometimes there's additional spot fires. And so it just helps kind of create a sense of tension and the types of dynamic things that can happen during a wildfire event. So that's a quick overview of the game. I've also, just to share with you all, so I've got like a facilitator's guide video because, for instance, there were some folks at Chico State who are quite interested, and they they built their own version of the game, which was great. I've also got communities where, I can't travel to, and so they want to run their own. So I've created a guide for how to facilitate it, which is not very complicated, but I think it's just helpful for folks to kind of understand the way that I'm both kind of setting up the game and some of the things like making sure that people don't feel a sense of judgment, because the idea is that not for them to act like the perfect kind of evacuation citizen, but actually to act as themselves so that the things that aren't quite working or could be addressed are sort of shared in an open space where there can be discussion about like how to troubleshoot that. Because for community leaders, the idea is, if everyone's on their best behavior, you're not going to learn a lot. And the idea is you want people to be as, authentically themselves as they can so that you can understand where the kind of difficult points are. And then the other thing I'll share is, this is something where I've I've done at least 15 iterations of this game, and I've really pushed it to the point where I'm thinking of it as like, how can I make this into a product that's scalable, where I can just, if someone wanted, if there were 1,000 communities in California that needed it, I would have a way to reasonably get that without, asking for a $500,000 grant from the NSF. So currently I have funding to create games, and really I have two goals at this point. One is to get this game into as many communities as possible. And the other is just to capture data for research. My understanding is like, I know this game is helpful. What I don't know is just exactly how helpful it is. And I think having a sense of if this is, a dramatically better way to engage communities with wildfire evacuation and preparation, then I think that would give me legs to kind of find other funding sources and potentially get this distributed in a broader way. The main interest I have for you all, and I'll stop sharing now, is basically as this has become much more like known, and there's folks around the country who have reached out. What I find is that I'm managing many, many relationships with a bunch of small Firewise communities, and it's just really hard for me to know like how to manage all those relationships. And so I think like what I'm looking for is a partner that will understand and have some interest in kind of potentially distributing the game or having connections to communities so that I can know that like I can be behind the scenes kind of making the games and optimizing them, and at least in terms of the foreseeable future, funding the creation of, all the little game parts and whatnot. But what I don't have is just a type of partner that can help me kind of scale this and get it, have the relationships with communities where I could get this into them. So that's what I have for you. I'd love to hear if folks have any interest or I'm curious if there's any questions. I know I kind of ran through that quickly, and I got a video and the website that I can share that will kind of give a little more details about the game. But I also just want to thank you all for having me on. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Tom. Great presentation. We'll go into questions. I see, is that Ben?
Yes, hi. First of all, I want to say congratulations and thank you so much for putting this together. It's definitely something that is going to encourage others to think about it, right? Especially people with families and young kids, people with elderly folks, in a senior citizen center. So all different aspects of the community can benefit from this. Thank you for sharing. And hopefully you've found a way to license this for yourself before it takes off and grows big. But this is definitely a great concept. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. It looks like in the chat, Dave Atkinson said the California Fire Safe Council could be a possible partner.
Okay.
I want to see that in the chat. And any presentation the presentation that you had today and any videos that you want, I can distribute to our MARAC members. You can send that over to me and I'll send that out after our meeting as well.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah.
Let's see here. We also have any thoughts of developing for different hazards?
Yes, and I absolutely have been thinking about that. One of the things so for instance, it's essentially there's similar aspects, but like to do a game for earthquakes would be quite different because there's certain things that are similar in terms of, like unexpected time and that type of thing. But the kind of dynamic nature of fire has very different than like earthquakes or say floods or I've had a lot of folks on the East Coast ask me about hurricanes, and that's like there's just so much more kind of predictability there. So absolutely interested in additional things, but right now I think before I go down that road, I also want to make sure that I have enough data collected to show that this is actually a more effective way. So my email
Yeah, that was one of the other questions in the
Yeah.
chat. If you could put your contact information for if somebody wants to
Yes.
contact you for this.
Yeah. So my email is just my first name plus my like unspellable last name at ucdavis.edu. Yeah, and I think that if yeah, so there's basically there's a couple things that that would be critical for me is that it's not it's just not able to be something that's worth my time to create a game for like 6 people, just because I've got it streamlined, but there's still some customization that happens. So to me, like the minimum group would be like 24, and then so just making sure that like you would need anyone who's interested in hosting this would need like a space to host, the ability to recruit a minimum of 24 people, and then just a kind of relatively contained community. But I could talk about that with individual folks. I just think the more coordination there is, the easier it'll be for me to then make sure I can kind of get to everybody. So, but yeah, happy to kind of talk more. And I think if anyone has contacts that I know I saw like California Wildfire or CERT, any contacts there would be great, because I think if this is coming through official channels, it's going to be far more powerful than just, you know, a random professor somewhere who has a, you know, an idea that people may not understand the history and the background and the years that I've been working in this space.
Thank you, Tom, very much for that information. I don't see any other hands up. Let me just look in the chat one more time. I don't see anything in the chat. All right, thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, please email if anyone has questions or interest.
All right, thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to Cal OES Earthquake, Tsunami, and Volcano program with Chris White about the Great California Shakeout Tour in October. Chris, are you on?
Hey, Melanie, this is a sound check. How you doing? Can you hear me?
Very good. Yes, I can.
Fantastic. And Thomas, if you want to beta a earthquake scenario program, I'm from the earthquake program in Cal OES. We'd love to participate. Let me share my
Great, we
screen
should
real
talk.
quick. Yeah. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, I could see it.
Okay, great. Let me. All right. Yeah. So I'm really excited to talk to you all. Thank you for the time, Melanie. Good morning. My name is Chris White. I'm part of the earthquake program at the Seismic Hazards Branch at Cal OES HQ. We're here to talk about the 2025 Great California Shakeout Tour. It's one of the most exciting times of the year for us, if not the most exciting time other than response. But before we jump into the Shakeout Tour, I just want to jump back real quick, give some 30,000 foot level context for California's earthquake risk and why we do the work we do. Most of you will be familiar with this information, but in case folks just joined the agency or haven't heard this in a while, it'll be a good refresher. So we have the highest earthquake in the United States. 500 are classified. We have 500 identified faults that are classified as active, posing a constant risk of earthquakes. Over 30 million Californians live within 30 miles of an active fault. There's a 99% chance of experiencing a magnitude 6.7 within the next 30 years. We just saw that on the magnitude 7.0 off Ferndale on December 5th of 2024. The latest annualized earthquake loss for California is estimated at $8 billion a year. So clearly, we need to prepare and practice to respond effectively to earthquakes and other seismic hazards. That's going to be critical to saving lives and protecting communities moving forward. So let's bring in the Great California Shakeout Tour. For 2025, we're anticipating 3 to 5 city tour. Right now, management is deliberating, so we haven't chosen the exact locations, but they'll be in multiple counties throughout the state. As always, the central focus is on our efforts to expand educational outreach via media outlets and in-person community engagement, and as far and as wide as we can. So those messages include drop or lock, cover, hold on, securing your space, increasing MyShake downloads, turning on phone notifications, and preparing an emergency preparedness kit and go bag. Those are all foundational messages that we hit every time we go to each location or do media interviews. So here in Sacramento, we're going to, at Calais HQ, we're going to try to expand our activities a little bit. We're hoping, we're not positive, but we're going to try to get an evacuation drill potentially going in one little part of our world. We're going to put out social media campaigns through PR firms and our PIO. We're going to try to get employees engaged in something called pastels in the parking lot, which we'll take a few of the parking spaces in our parking lot and get different units to kind of compete against each other by coming up with creative murals. And then the winner will get a certain type of prize, whether that's an emergency go bag or some other type of prize. Then there's the Quake Heroes screening, which is a really moving documentary made by our very close partner, the Earthquake Country Alliance, that can be screened. If people want a link, we can get it to you. And then we always have a drill coordination with the California State Warning Center. But today's presentation is really about sharing what I just said, what we're going to do here at HQ. But for those of you out in the field and in various counties, really trying to push and do any type of participation that you can on October 16th of this year. And it doesn't have to be on October 16th. It's like, that's the day that over 10 million Californians participate, over 50 million people worldwide are involved in the Great California Shakeout. But really, it's just to try to get this on your radar screens, get people engaged, and reach out to us if you need help. In 2024, this is just a real brief overview. We hit 3 cities. We were doing media interviews, there's an earthquake simulator at each stop. And so we had over 200 people take a ride, over 40 media interviews, and nearly 30,000 MyShake downloads. So it really is a powerful agent of change. All right, please take a snapshot of this, download it, get it out. Please register at shakeout.org, and there's really great resources at shakeout.org/resources. They can give you, gifts and announcements that you can put over public radio, speakers. There are printouts of different scenarios that you can run. There's graphics that you can share. There's a whole litany of resources. It's really, really educational, and it can help out not only people like us, our institutions, but businesses and other organizations. So, what's the overall message? Drop, cover, and hold on, right? Earthquakes can happen anywhere, anytime. We got to practice. We have to be safe. Drop, cover, hold on is the most important immediate response to an earthquake. And that's because most of the injuries that occur are caused by people trying to move or run outside while the shaking is still occurring. So drop where you are onto your hands and knees. This position protects you from being knocked down and reduces your chances of being hit by falling or flying into objects. Cover your head and neck with one arm. Hold on until the shaking stops. And obviously practicing this protects our families and coworkers. The Great California Shakeout this is the perfect opportunity to get people wrapped up and engaged and practice this even more. So again, please register, participate, get on shakeout.org, download the QR. Let's push the message as far as we can. We here at the Earthquake Program and at Seismic Hazards, we have a whole bunch of additional resources. I don't want to take up too much time, but you can go to earthquake.ca.gov, especially /get alerts. That's where you can find out more about MyShake, the wireless emergency alerts, signing up for phone notifications. Downloading MyShake is one of our greatest tools, so really try to push that message. We also have the Earthquake Readiness Guide, which provides basic steps to guide your preparedness and response. You can find that at earthquake.ca.gov. There's the 7 steps to earthquake safety, preparing a go kit. There's all these different resources. So just want to briefly mention that. And here's my contact information. Again, if you all have questions, if we can help get the message out, if you're thinking about different activities, please let us know. We want to expand 2025 beyond 2024. And this is an exciting opportunity to do that. So please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It looks like we do have a question. Jeff?
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Melanie and Chris. Thank you so much. You mentioned the 3 to 5 cities. Do you know when you'll know those cities? And do you know if one will be in the Bay Area?
We don't know exactly. We're hoping in the next couple weeks. So, and then once we have that, we can start pushing that messaging out. So right now we tend to try to hit the biggest media markets first, so we can push out our message as far and as wide as possible. That often includes the Bay, but I can't commit to anything right now as our management's still ruminating, still considering options.
Understood. That sounds great. If I may, just a quick plug, the Bay Area ECA workshop is going to be August 27th, at the Hayward City Hall. I'll put on the chat, and also on the 26th, the day before, the ECA and California Resiliency Alliance will be doing a haywired scenario workshop for businesses, exercise toolkit for businesses in Redwood City. And I'll put that into the chat. But thank you so much, Kristopher.
Of course. Thank you, Jeff. Great partner out in the Bay. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. We have another question, Ryan, and then we have another one after that.
Good morning, Chris. This is Ryan CPN down in Region 5. I guess my question was the same that Jeff had. I know one of the OAs here in Region 5, they've been really adamant about wanting to get the shake trailer down to the Fresno area. And so I'm actually talking to them right now and kind of speaking on their behalf. But that is a resource and educational opportunity they would like to see in Fresno at some point. I know that's been asked in the last couple of years. So I just really wanted to voice that request on behalf of Fresno County. Also kind of throwing out advertising there in September 20th is their Emergency Preparedness and Safety Fair here in Fresno County, and that would be a great resource to have at that event. So just throwing that out there, letting you know that's still a want that they would like to see in Region 5 at some point when you guys are, deciding on which 5 cities it'll travel to. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for voicing that. They've let us know, and we've been responding to them. They've been great in terms of their enthusiasm, and we've kind of sent that up the chain. And there's just so much to consider right now. I see Lori has her hand up. Perhaps she has some input also, but there's a lot of different inputs that are involved in the decision making, and we're waiting on that feedback. But yeah, thank you for voicing that for sure.
Right, Lori, did you have more to add on that or a question?
Might be mic'd, Lori.
Lori, I'm not too sure if you took your hand down or if you had a question, Lori. We'll come back to her. Amanda, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, similar to Fresno County, I just wanted to mention that on September 13th, City of Santa Cruz is holding a tsunami awareness event called Race the Wave. Where they're actually having a public racing event for folks starting at the Santa Cruz Wharf and running along the flood inundation zone for tsunamis in the city of Santa Cruz. And it's ending with the safety fair in the afternoon.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so that would be another great event to have your team and the shake trailer if you're available. And I can give you the contact for the emergency manager in the city of Santa Cruz if you're interested.
Yeah, we'd love to take as many requests as possible. The only issue is, we all have different restrictions on the state budget, and there's a lot of requests that come in. But yeah, please send that our way. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat, and yeah, we'd love to consider it.
Perfect, thanks.
And in the chat, it looks like also Oakland is also in. And wanting the shake trailer as well. I see Lori said that she was muted. I'll go back to Lori real quick before I go to Jose. Lori, are you back on? Okay, I'm not hearing Lori. We'll go to Jose.
Good morning. On behalf of Riverside County, my name is Jose Ortega. I work with Caloies. I'm their Southern Region response. I serve their county, but one thing that came up last year was once we do this, or once the cities are decided, could there be some coordination between the OA and the city as well? Could we include them in the communication so that way they can work on mass messaging? One of the events out in Riverside County would have been, they feel it would have been a little more successful if we would have included our local or their local PIOs as well as the city PIO to help push the same message. It kind of felt like everything was done very, very sudden for them. So we did get a lot of feedback on that. So they just want to help push the message. They want to help align. And if there is any other like locations within the counties that you guys select, as well as the cities, they want to help make sure that people arrive to the locations and there's no confusion, but just a little more collaboration was the expression I received.
Yeah, for sure. That's on our radar from last year. As soon as these are chosen and decided upon, we're going to reach out to you all first and make sure that we coordinate as best as we can. 100%.
All right, thank you. That's pretty much what Lori was saying in the chat. She's saying that when the Shakeout tour is decided, that they will reach out to the OAs first. So let's see here. Jose, did you have another question or did you still have your hand up? Just checking with you before I move on.
I just wanted
Okay.
to make two comments. The first one is we will make, the Shake trailer is a great tool for getting that education and outreach and preparedness out there to our communities. And I'm not sure that most people are aware that Calories doesn't actually own that trailer. A contractor actually does, and we can make the contact information available to everybody here. So that they may themselves be able to bring the trailer to their own communities. We'll make sure that Chris follows up and provides that contact information before the meeting is over. And lastly, of course, as it relates to the tour, our first step will always be to reach out to the OAs to make sure that they are both informed that a Shake trailer will be within their counties, but also to provide that level of coordination. As we always do, we want to make sure that the emergency manager is able to push out the messaging just the same as we are. And of course, they are always invited to be present and a part of the actual stop within their communities. We'll make sure that we will do that, after we have settled on the sites for this year.
All right, thank you so much, everybody, for that information. It looks like, yeah, Chris, any information that you have that you want me to push out at the end of this, I will go ahead and do so. And again, as we could see, more information to follow on that. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. And just like a bunch of us are from the field, we know how important it is to coordinate down to y'all. So we will make sure that happens. So thank you.
Santa Barbara's going, or San Bernardino's going on.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
We'll move over to Callaway as disaster logistics. Justin Milami and Russ Eads in reference to the field task force. Do I have Justin or Russ on the line?
Yeah, Russ here. And Justin should be on here too. So yeah, I'm Russ Eads. I'm with the disaster logistics unit at Cal OES, but I'm on here representing the fuels task force. And I'm going to do a quick brief on the our fuels resiliency survey. And then after that, Justin is going to go over the survey form in detail. So let me share my screen. Can you guys see it?
Yes, I could see it.
Excellent. Okay, so here's the agenda. We're going to go over basically the purpose and method for collecting the data and what we're going to do with it regarding the fuel survey. So the fuel survey we developed with the Idaho National Labs, and it's designed to collect fuel use data from cities and counties and their op areas, and the data is for all their like first responder vehicles, no state vehicles, not like CAL FIRE units in their county, but local law enforcement, fire, EMS, public works, anything that's going to be activated for an emergency. We've talked about it with Santa Clara and Imperial counties. They're already kind of doing their own, and we're going to see if once they do that, they can put that data into our format so we can collect the data. And I mean, the purpose is just to, for if they have a fuel shortage or like a a fuel issue during an emergency, we can better respond and help them and provide the fuels they need to make up any deficiencies. The structure of the survey, it's Excel based, so anyone should be able to open it. It has contact info, obviously. It covers missions and common operations that they do. Now vehicles, we list them by type and number, not like, there's not like a line for every vehicle, but you'll put like this type of fire engine, quantity, fuel capacity, fuel usage. We have that for any other equipment that uses fuel and generators. Then has places for where they store fuel, who their providers are, and if they have any plans to switch to EV or any other type of fuel-saving vehicle equipment. The collection that or the info that we collect, I kind of went over already, but the fuel delivery methods, how they get it, pipeline, truck, train, etc. Type, gasoline, diesel, jet, biofuel. The fuel tanks that they have on their facilities, what their capacity is, and what kind of fuel they normally have. Their regular delivery schedules, and then their consumption in gallons per hour by vehicle type on average during an emergency. Our survey rollout. I see somebody else's thing on the screen. Okay. Our survey rollout is 3 phases. Phase 1 is the first phase with Imperial and Santa Clara counties. The second phase is getting it out to all operational areas. And then the third phase would be to collect all the data and compile it into something it's more easy to digest. Some of the barriers we got now, though, is we don't have any funding for this, so it's kind of just on voluntary, if you have time sort of situation. As far as we know, the OAs don't have any grant funding, so we just got to rely on people to do it voluntarily.
Can you try to reshare your screen because it's gone away?
Yeah, let's see. Is it back?
Yes.
Excellent. Sorry. All right. Well, we'll get to the questions at the end here real quick. Okay, the data collection. We'll get all the surveys together, compile them into, by county and region, what we would need to provide should the need arise. We'll build a procurement model for how we would get fuel to those regions if necessary. We'll contact Idaho National Labs and use their data modeling software to create data points. And then the Fuels Task Force will continue to collect information and update information as needed. Here's the partners involved. So the Fuels Task Force has people from disaster logs, disaster planning unit, preparedness and planning and preparedness, and the critical infrastructure protection unit, the STAC. Regional response will participate, the California Energy Commission, and the Idaho National Labs. Here's just a recap. We're going to roll out the survey in 2025. It's a voluntary basis only. We can't force OAs to do it. It's phased approach. We'll get all the data and we'll maintain the data for future incidents. For further information, here is me and Justin and I's contact information. And I will be followed by Justin Milami to go over the actual survey.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I'll just do a quick walkthrough of the survey. It's an Excel spreadsheet, so it's fairly easy to complete, but we do have staff available to assist if you would like to volunteer to assist us with this. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so let me just get set up here. So we have an instruction sheet, kind of goes over each of the tabs and what we're looking for. Part 1, this is our contact, missions, and ops. So number 1 is kind of your general information, contact of the operational area, the city or the county, who the people are, if you have a fuel management plan, kind of that general information. Tab 2, this is more or less collecting mission essential functions and those supporting activities. So just some examples here. This is not an exhaustive list of everything that you guys may do, but just kind of contains a good general list, a starting point. And then as we scroll over, we're just looking to capture that information here. There are some drop downs to kind of help support this a little bit. But again, you can add information as needed. Operations, so it's kind of taking those mission essential functions, identifying those and tying them to a type of fuel that's used. And then what sustainability level of those fuels if there is some type of an incident that's occurring and there is a fuel disruption. So, you know, will the vehicle or the piece of equipment need fuel in 24 to 48 hours, 48 to 72, et cetera, et cetera. So part 2 of this is getting into kind of the vehicles and the equipment. So what's the equipment category of the vehicle? What's the essential function of that vehicle? How many do you have? What's the fuel type? Is it alternative fuel? Fuel tank capacity? And just kind of most of that information regarding your vehicle equipment. And as we scroll over, then we get into the more detailed equipment, chainsaws, things like that, blowers, other activities that may be required if there is some type of event that's occurring. Then we jump into generators. Do you have backup generation at your facilities? What is the list of those facilities? Who are the contacts? The type of fuel, the fueling method, and then the locations. And then part 3. This is more tied into fuel locations, so both commercial as well as on-site fueling. So this first tab is what is the fuel location, where is it located? And again, this could be your on-site fueling, or this could be your local, you know, your Chevron, and so forth that you guys might utilize. You know, do they have backup power? Who's emergency contacts? Is it private? Is it commercial? A lot of that information. Fuel providers. So do you have commercial fuel brought into certain locations? If you do, who are those providers? Where are they bringing that fuel into? You know, do those contracts include emergency fueling within them? And then do you have backup support for that as well? And then the last piece of this is, are there any energy resilience initiatives or improvements planned for your jurisdiction? You know, fleet expansion, reduction, new energy efficient equipment, facility expansion reductions, those types of items to list here. And so that's kind of the spreadsheet in a nutshell. We're looking to gather this information just to help identify gaps, look where some of our the biggest needs are within the state. As Russ mentioned earlier, this is voluntary. So we're looking for a few OAs to kind of step up and help get this information. And then we can work with you guys to identify the gaps and kind of develop plans and look to see where those fueling needs may be. So that's all that I have. Any questions?
I see that there were some questions in the chat, and I see Russ has been answering those. Thank you, Russ.
Thanks,
And we
Russ.
have a question from Brandy.
I just was wondering, do you have a time frame of how you're working this through in terms of when you want these responses back if an OA decides to move forward with it? I'm looking at it from a local perspective.
Yeah, we would work with the OA on that. I mean, obviously, we don't want to burden you guys with all this information. There's a lot that's being requested. So we would definitely look to work with each individual OA to come up with a reasonable timeline to get this completed. And we do have staff available that can assist with any questions or anything like that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And Jeff, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Hi, Justin, Jeff with SFO Airport. You mentioned jet fuel here. Is this geared towards airports, public use airports, or what would our role or what would our participation be in the survey?
Yeah, definitely. We could include the airports in this as well. I mean, you guys utilize fuel and there's a need for it, especially during an incident. So that's something we'd also look to capture.
Okay. Sounds good. Now the survey will come out in a separate email or?
Well, we're going to do is Russ and I'll drop our contact information into the chat here, and just feel free to reach out to both of us, and then we can get you on the line and start working a plan, figure out kind of, when we want to do this, the dates and so forth.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jeff.
All right, thank you, Justin and Russ, for your presentation. I don't see any other questions or hands up in the chat. Thanks again, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, we are right on schedule. We'll go over to the National Weather Service, Courtney Carpenter.
Alrighty, good morning, everyone. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Alrighty, thanks for having me. For those that don't know me, I'm Courtney Carpenter. I'm the Warning Coordination Meteorologist in the Weather Service Office in Sacramento, and also the state liaison for all our weather forecast offices that cover California. I also have Mike M. Garden here with me from the California Nevada River Forecast Center. We're just gonna kind of introduce National Weather Service flood inundation mapping. This is rolling out to our area next month. I will just say that this is a brief overview. Your local weather service office will be contacting the local OAs for more detailed location-specific training, so stay tuned for that. So we're going to go over kind of an implementation of NWS. We call it FIM, flood inundation mapping, so I don't have to say that 100 times during this presentation. We'll show you various types of FIM, including static maps and event-driven dynamic maps. We'll kind of discuss the many limitations of FIM that are currently present in California, and we'll go over some tools and resources available to you. So historically, the National Weather Service has issued river forecast products at a forecast point, which you're used to viewing in a hydrograph that has observations from a river gauge, as well as the River Forecast Center forecast for that point that usually goes out several days in advance. As part of National Weather Service's flood inundation map initiatives, we will be better able to communicate where the water will be and model the inundation along a waterway. So in this example here, we have our traditional hydrograph on the left, which shows major flooding and the impact statements associated with that level. And then on the right side, you can see the purple is mapping a visual depiction of the roadways that are inundated. So this would give you a better understanding of the scope of floodwaters versus just a point hydrograph. This is another example closer to home in Southern California. So the hydrograph on the left shows the Santa Clara River crested just below minor flood stage. And then the example on the right shows the extent of the floodwaters there in blue through Ventura, California. And that would give us some confidence of inundation that would impact the golf course there along 101. So National Weather Service's flood inundation mapping is basically a nationwide initiative. This is congressionally mandated. We had 5 years basically to roll this out to the entire country through a congressional mandate and funding. So this initially started to roll out in October 2023 to 10% of the population. The following October, last October, they expanded to include about 30% of the population. So they kind of targeted areas where this would be most useful. And then next month is our turn. So the FIM program will further expand to include a majority of California there. You can see in the kind of the gold color, as well as large portions of the central US. And then next year, we'll get to 100% of the population next October. So the FIM program is managed by our National Water Center, which is located in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And then it's supported locally by your local weather forecast office, as well as the California Nevada River Forecast Center. Towards the end of the presentation, I'll have kind of a list of contacts for your individual county or OA. So as I mentioned, this is kind of a phased implementation. The mandate said in 5 years, by 2026, the entire population will be served. So we're getting closer to that goal. As I mentioned, this is kind of a brief overview, and your local office will be doing more localized training for you all. So let's kind of discuss the types of maps that we'll be rolling out with this service. So the first one is static maps or categorical FIM. We call it CAT FIM because we love acronyms in this agency. But basically it is produced at an official river forecast point, and it depicts the inundation based on a flood threshold. So whether that's action stage, minor flood stage, moderate flood stage, major flood stage, or record stage. When correctly produced, these would be valuable resources for emergency planning with respect to future flooding. However, again, we want to point out there are some big caveats and limitations that will impact us here in California. First of all, forecast points within the leveed systems, such as in the northern part of the state, Sacramento River, infrequently reach the established flood stages. So some of the CAT FIMs, such as moderate, major, and record flood stages, are not available. Also, the present modeling doesn't take into consideration some of our state's key flood conveyance and diversion systems, including major weirs and bypasses, and we'll kind of dig more into the limitations here in a little bit. So this is kind of an animation of CAT FIM at the various thresholds. It starts with action stage. You can see it would kind of depict flooding within the river channel as we go higher up in stage. So the Weather Service issues river flood warnings, as most of you probably know, when a river is forecast to reach or exceed that minor flood stage. And then beyond that, moderate and major flooding represents more severe flood-related impacts. For our leveed river systems in California, major flood stage typically aligns with the top of the levee elevation along that specific reach of the river. So a few examples of the good and bad here. And again, these are sort of focused in Northern California, and your local office has all the specifics for your area. But this is along the Sacramento River at Bend Bridge, which is in Tehama County, and is the first forecast point along the Sacramento River. So you can see that CAT FIM is available downstream of the river gauge and does a reasonable job of showing where the inundation would be for action or minor flood stage, which is depicted in the orange and the yellow areas. It also depicts moderate, major, and record flooding in red, purple, and blue colors respectively, but there are some limitations kind of in the side channel there where the moderate and major stages are not depicted. So in my area in NWS Sacramento, we have 34 river forecast points. This is sort of the best performing one and one of the only few that performs well. This is another example. This is hard to see, but for those familiar with the area, this is the yellow bypass here. So examples like this are more common than the good examples, unfortunately. So this is the Sacramento River at the Fremont Weir. For those of you familiar, the Fremont Weir is basically designed to divert water out of the Sacramento River to alleviate downstream flows into the Sacramento metro area. The weir basically is designed to spill when the gauge hits action stage and flow begins into that yellow bypass. But as you can see here, the flow basically stops at the weir and leaves the yellow bypass dry. And then doesn't depict anything above minor flood stage. So this is one of the many bad examples in FIM as it stands now for us. So the next type is dynamic event-driven FIM maps. This basically, there are several versions of this that update during events. The first one is our national water model max forecast inundation. So basically the max inundation levels expected over the next 5 days. The precipitation model driving this is the national blend of models, which we use at our offices in California and across much of the United States now. The limitations with this is that the national water model is run automatically and it's not able to be quality controlled at a local level. So it just runs automatically with inputs. And again, like all FIM, right, we're talking about the extent of flooding, but it doesn't yet model the depth of flooding, which is also very important to know. The next one is the River Forecast Center Max Inundation Forecast. This takes the official River Forecast Center river forecasts, and when they are expected to exceed action stage, it will transform them into flood inundation maps. These benefit from input quality control checks. There's actually a human making this forecast here in the office. But there's, again, limitations that it's only available for locations downstream of an official river forecast point, and it only depicts the extent of the inundation, not the depth. The third type, and again, we'll send out these slides, so this is a lot. You'll see it again from your local office. The last one is the National Water Model Latest Analysis FIM. So while the other one's focused on a forecast, this focuses on the present, where the water is now. So this depicts the closest reasonable inundation that exceed the high water threshold. This does have a time lag of roughly an hour, and the reliability decreases significantly in waterways that are ungauged. So if there's no gauge to kind of fact check what the model's doing. Again, depicts extent, not depth of the floodwaters. So basically, I've explained there are a lot of limitations, so let's kind of dig into them. It theoretically and ideally would give us all a better idea of flood inundation potential in California, but the product and the modeling is in its infancy, and it's just not there yet for use for most of us across the state. So one of the big limitations is how it deals with tidally influenced areas, which is a lot of us along the coast and further inland in the Sacramento region especially. There are, it only depicts basically freshwater non-tidal flooding. So the tides are not included in this. There are modeling efforts underway at the National Water Center, hopefully in future iterations, to further develop their modeling capabilities to include both tidally influenced areas, such as in this example, the Bay Area and the Delta, but again, that's still under development. As I showed in some of the examples, weirs and bypasses, the National Water Model isn't accurately portraying basically what we all know is our extensive water conveyance system. So that's diversions, weirs, bypasses. It's evident both in the static maps and the dynamic event-driven maps. So all the local offices in the California Nevada River Forecast Center have gone through each FIM, basically hand-picking everything and noting all the issues, and have opened kind of trouble tickets with the National Water Center on these specific problems. So hopefully that future developments will better model our conveyance systems. So again, you can see this is another weir where it basically doesn't spill over into the weir, which is what our flood system is designed to do during high water. Another limitation is the resolution of the modeled streamline. So it basically models where it thinks the stream, the creek, the river is supposed to be. It has problems, especially for rivers, which are a lot of our rivers that meander or have frequent bends. So the resolution pretty much is too coarse. And so the red line is where it's modeling the stream. You can see it leaves the actual stream many times. This is an example again on the Sacramento River, but it exits the river. So it's not even modeling where the river is correctly. This is another example from Monterey County where the river meanders, and it pretty much the streamline leaves the channel a lot of times. So when it's modeling inundation, it's not modeling it correctly. Another limitation that we found is kind of the backwater effects where we have two rivers and they come together. So this is an example from the American River at the confluence of the Sacramento River in the Sac metro area. You can see the flood inundation it just stops where there's two rivers come together, and it doesn't model the backwater well either. Other limitations that are known in our state are all our levees. So we have hundreds, thousands of miles of levee systems in the state that protect a lot of our communities. So it does incorporate levees that are modeled in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers National Levee Database. But with the levees, it doesn't really depict accurately overtopping of the levees. And it also, for those that aren't in the database, those can be ignored or missed. Another problem is for locations that infrequently reach flood stage, which is a lot of our points along the leveed systems. Each forecast point has a rating curve, basically that establishes the relationship between our modeled flow and the expected river stage at that flow. So if a forecast doesn't have a rating curve that extends high enough, the categorical FIM would not be available at that level either. So overall, we're introducing this because it's going public and it's going live next month, but we want you to be aware of the significant limitations across a lot of our area. It is another tool to look at when you're making decisions, and they're continuously improving the model. It's well funded and they're continuously developing it. So we're hopeful that in the future it will improve for the state of California. So where can you view all this stuff if you're interested in digging in? So the National Water Center's flood inundation mapping obviously is run out of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. It will soon again be available for most of California in September. So all of the products we discussed today are available on the National Water Prediction Service, or NWPS webpage, which is really easy to remember, water.noaa.gov. It also has available on the NWS GIS viewer for those GIS gurus in the crowd. And there is kind of a public handbook that it's available that kind of documents everything we've hit on today and goes into more depth for the user. So feel free to check that out as well. There's also many different ways in GIS layers to get this information. So it's available on NWS HydroView platform and several ways that you could actually pull this into your own dashboards. And these are all linked on the National Water Center's page that goes into kind of the latest and details for accessing the data. On most of us in California use the California Nevada River Forecast Center, but there is water.noaa.gov, all the hydro information for the whole country. This will be available on this GIS portal, this mapping viewer. Flood inundation there is on the right-hand menu. You can just click it on and it will plop in. You can zoom in and it will plop in flood inundation modeling where it's available. Obviously not for us till next month, but if there's flooding in other parts of the country and you want to check it out, feel free to do that. This is basically how it will look on that NWPS system. You can see this is in Connecticut, but you can basically see the flood inundation is depicted in dark blue along the river, and it will also give you the river observations and forecast all in one nice little view. Remember, we also talked about those categorical FIM. So what is modeled sort of at those action, minor, moderate, major record flood stages. This will also, where that's available at those points, you can click on all those layers and kind of see where it's statically depicting flow to be an inundation. Again, everything is linked on the National Water Center's webpage as well. There's a QR code. And we'll send these slides out so you have all this information. So again, that was a lot of information very quickly. Your local weather service office has two. We've been training basically for the last year and looking over this stuff. Every office has two experts or subject matter experts in their office. They will be reaching out to their counties and partners directly over the next couple months. But if you need anything, I don't have access to the chat, so I can't put my email in the chat, but feel free to reach out to me and I can direct you to the correct contact for your office. Again, this will be rolling out over the next month or two with more training and certainly localized to your area. If you want to schedule something for your agency or your county directly, feel free to proactively reach out to your offices as they work to schedule this within their area. So that is all I have, unless there are any questions. Let me check out the chat.
Thank you, Courtney. It looks like you hit on a few of the things. If a jurisdiction wanted to request a presentation, I believe you already hit on that.
Yep.
And
yeah, feel free to
the
reach
last-
out, or you'll hear from your local offices soon.
Do you have access to the chat? There's just a comment at the very end. I can read it if you
Yeah.
don't. Just great presentation.
Yeah. Bonnie, I see your thing. That's unfortunately it's congressionally mandated, and so it has to be put out. Again, it works well in a lot of other portions of the country. They've used it for hurricanes, they've used it for a lot of flooding events, with pretty good success. But as you mentioned, until they fix some of the modeling issues in California, it's not super usable. So that is something we'll be hitting on in our local training. Unfortunately, it's there. We're not going to be advertising, at least in my office, on social media and that sort of thing. So to not hopefully draw too much public attention to it. But yeah, that's something we'll have to work through within our offices. But unfortunately, we have no choice. It's getting rolled out. And so we just have to navigate that as best we can.
All right, thanks, Courtney. And if you could send me the slides again for everybody at the end of this
Yes.
meeting today, I'll send out all the presentations that our presenters have gone over today, and I'll send that out with the link to the recording as well.
Thanks, Melanie. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you, Courtney. I don't see any more comments in the chat. And let's see here. We will go ahead and move on. Thanks again, Courtney. Appreciate it. We'll go to William Burke, California Veterinary Emergency Team. William, are you on?
I am. Give me a moment as I try to share my screen. Hello. Actually, let me. Okay. Is that working? Can everyone see the screen?
Yes, I could see it.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Good morning to everyone. My name is William Burke. I'm the Associate Director of Planning for the California Veterinary Emergency Team. Today, what I'm going to do is just tell you a little bit about our program and see CVET as a resource you can utilize during disasters. I'm going to talk about what the CVET program is, how we're organized, our structure, our integration structure, and our volunteer tiered levels. I'm going to talk about our response capabilities. So what services can we provide during disaster? The deployment process, how to get a hold of our team during a disaster. CVET resources. So we have a number of resources that you can share with both your emergency services colleagues as well as those in the veterinary field in your local areas. And then I'll field any questions about anything I went over in the talk. So first and foremost, our mission is to lead collaborative veterinary response. So you can see an example of how we expect to integrate if there's any sort of existing animal care branch, but working very closely with local animal services as well as community animal response teams, which are generally volunteer organizations that play a role in animal disaster response, whether that's evacuation, sheltering, a mix of both. They come in many different shapes and sizes. But the idea here, and highlighted in our mission statement, is the idea of collaborative veterinary care. So we understand there are local services that can provide veterinary care. The Veterinary Medical Association here in California has a program to provide veterinary care during during disaster. And what we want to do is collaborate to provide veterinary services to meet the needs of the incident. So whether that's providing, beginning to end services or whether it's coordinating local resources, whatever is needed, we hope to provide and can help you out during disasters. The way we provide veterinary care is through a large database of volunteer responders. So we've gone through the state recruiting veterinarians, veterinary technicians, and assistants, and those with experience in animal response or animal care and clinical care. The idea here is that these individuals have been pre-identified to wanting to volunteer during disaster. So we have a small full-time team based at UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine in Davis, California, but our volunteers are throughout the state. Our database is over 400 of these veterinary professionals, again, throughout the state, but we also partner closely with organizations that give us additional personnel that we can tap into during disaster response. So two of those larger organizations providing veterinary care are the California Veterinary Medical Association, Medical Reserve Corps, CAVMARC, as well as the Northern California Association of Equine Practitioners, NCAEP. Some of our required training for these volunteers are your basic FEMA IS courses, 100, 200, 700, and 800. We've developed a CVET Basics course that essentially goes over our standard operating procedures and what's expected of those wanting to volunteer with the CVET program, as well as an all hazards safety course, essentially how to keep yourself and others safe in austere environments out in the field. Those are our basic levels of training for what we call a core responder, but we're developing additional tiers of leadership. So we have, as you can see here, a task force responder. So that may be a specialized area of expertise that someone can pursue additional training in, such as providing care for working animals. You know, something that requires a little bit higher level, a little bit more specialized area of veterinary medicine. If you complete those requirements, you can then be identified as a task force responder. And then again, another tier of response leadership. So this idea of a manager role or a section chief role, whatever that may be within our organizational structure. Some of these photos are from exercises and trainings that we've had. So we want to provide a lot of these online trainings and opportunities online, given that our volunteers are spread across the state, but also we want to hold as many in-person opportunities as possible. So that's in Davis, California, but as well as elsewhere outside of California, to make it convenient for our volunteers to come in person, understand what we are, see our resources, and get a little bit more of that feel of what it is to respond with the CVET program. Here's just an example of what our operational structure could look like in a higher level activation. So you see that we have a planning section led by myself, but we also have logistics personnel to manage general logistics. We have several trailers as well as a fleet of vehicles, which I'll detail in a moment. But veterinary logistics, as you can imagine, ordering treatment, bandages, other inventory for veterinary care. And then we have a personnel coordinator to manage that database, volunteer database. Then a traditional operations section that can be split up either by area of expertise or geographical location, similar to the idea of ICS within other fields. So moving on to our capabilities of what can we provide during a disaster. We primarily expect to provide sheltering in a disaster activation. Sheltering veterinary care in a disaster, but we can also provide field care. So that's going out with whether it be animal services, emergency responders, or these CART organizations to care for animals in the field, provide veterinary care or quality of life assessments, triage in the field. And then additionally, I talked a little bit about the utilization of working animals becoming a larger and larger portion of emergency response. Those animals need a more dedicated level of veterinary care, more routine, higher frequency level of checks as they're going out and doing their work. So we have that opportunity to provide dedicated care to those working animals. Additional areas that we could potentially provide support are in evacuation. While we're not necessarily performing the services of evacuating animals, we understand that that comes with a lot of risk, and that whether it be setting up a triage station or working with those individuals that are performing evacuation, having that veterinary expertise on site can be helpful. Similarly, in the idea of technical animal rescue, site needs assessment. So if you've set up a disaster animal shelter and you'd like someone, again, in the subject matter expert to lay eyes on your setup and provide feedback about improvement or how things are going or things that we've learned, we have the ability to do that. in some areas, animal control officers are not capable of providing field euthanasia. So in the event that you have a significant need for that, we can supplement those services. Coordination support. So often we find that animal services is struggling to be represented in the EOC due to staffing, workload, whatever it may be. So from a coordination support of animal response, we have an ability to support in that area as well. The deployment process of how to get a hold of our program is simply a standard resource request in your operational area EOC. So whether that's at a local government level or your more traditionally at a county level, you'll put in a standard resource request for veterinary resources. We are currently working on a fact sheet to help emergency managers understand what is and what shouldn't be included in that standard veterinary resource request. This is a working document that both the UC Davis CVET program has approved as well as CDFA, but we're waiting on final approval from Cal OAS. And this is just the idea of when can you request veterinary resources, what challenges are appropriate to request veterinary resources for, and then what to include in your request. Similarly, until this is drafted, until this is finalized, I encourage you all to, if you're thinking about you may need veterinary resources in a EOC activation and in a disaster, you can also reach out to our program to help determine your level of need and what's going on. All of our contact information will be included in this PowerPoint as well, and whether it be a requesting process or a preparedness question or animal disaster response, please reach out to our program. We are happy to receive phone calls, emails, whatever it may be, and help you work through any of your challenges. So I'm going to share with you affectionately some of our toys that we have, some of our response resources. So we have 4 large mobile veterinary clinics. You can see in these trailers here. So the ones with essentially we have a small animal trailer, a large animal trailer, and a bit of a logistics, laboratory, administrative trailer, and then one trailer still being custom fitted on the inside to become a veterinary trailer. Again, these are all modular. So while the small animal trailer is generally set up to manage small animals, it can be converted and shifted and vice versa with all the others. So these are 20 to 24 foot trailers. You can see some of the inside with limited ability to house some of higher acuity patients. We've got exam space, laboratory benches, a surgical suite, and then additionally, so here's another trailer that we've had, the large animal on the other side. You can see detailed with some of the large animals on the side of the trailer. We've also got a couple of horse trailers, and then in the lower right-hand corner is a large 44-foot racing trailer. I talked about retrofitting a 4th trailer. This is a really large resource that could additionally contain some human housing. So ability to have on-call veterinarians 24/7 is, once that trailer gets done, is certainly a possibility. Some of the resources additionally to manage these large resources, these large response trailers. We've got several vehicles. You can see here we've got a Tahoe, the Excursion, a 250, a 450, and a 550. But we also have access to UC Davis's fleet services. So while we maintain these vehicles that you see here, we also have additional resources to tap being a part of the UC Davis system. The Excursion down in the lower left, you can see has a vet truck bed built into the back. So that contains everything you would need to provide those field services that I was talking about before with all your veterinary equipment, essentially a mobile veterinary clinic in itself. So structures, we've got a couple of 20 by 20 Zoom rows, they're called. These are inflatable tents, but they're pretty durable. They've got AC and lighting throughout. You can connect them both for a 40 by 40 structure. We also have access to Western shelters. So while we have a couple of Western shelters owned by the CVET program, there's other disaster response programs within UC Davis that we partner with, one being the Oiled Wildlife Care Network that has a number of additional Western sheltered structures. So the photo above being an example of a large scale activation example of what we could set up in your area. And then finally, as far as resources, obviously being a part of the UC Davis Veterinary Teaching Hospital and the school here at UC Davis, we have the latest and greatest in veterinary equipment. So again, I talked a little bit about the truck bed, but as well as these field packs, oxygen kennels, portable ultrasounds, anesthesia machines, pet maps, again, everything you would need to provide field care and disaster or emergency shelter veterinary care. These photos are kind of an idea from an exercise that we've set up about what you could expect as far as what these trailers look like, usually attached to a truck. And then you can see the back folds down, animals, people in and out, just an idea of what structure would look like. Additional resources that I would encourage you all to take advantage of, they can all be found on our website, but these are documents that can be, whether they be printed off or referenced during disasters, helpful for providing local veterinary services a leg up in, again, providing those veterinary services themselves. So you can see here we've got examples of sheltering best practices, biosecurity recommendations, species-specific guidance, so feeding, handling, how to take what are normal vitals on different species, etc. Triage protocol, animal monitoring sheets, and veterinary request logs. So these are recommended to be printed off, laminated, put in a disaster binder, and placed at, whatever veterinary services are responsible for disaster care, primarily in your agency, but also can be referenced at any time on our website. Some more preparedness work we've been doing is, I may have met with many of you before or someone on my team. We've been meeting with officials throughout the state of California with all 58 counties, with individuals from Office of Emergency Services, Animal Services, those CART organizations, so those any sort of volunteer program that plays a role in animal disaster response. And we've tried to subjectively capture what is the likelihood of veterinary need in that county should a significant disaster occur. We look at multiple factors about animal services, staffing and capabilities, the existence, as I mentioned, of a CART and the CART's strength or experience in providing services in previous disasters, as well as we really hone in on the local veterinary services. So what on a daily basis are you pulling from to provide veterinary care? Is there an abundance of veterinary services in your area? Is it a veterinary desert, et cetera? And we subjectively put together these ratings that can be referenced in the future. So the idea here is that if someone new is, someone maybe in an emergency services role is new to animal disaster response and wants to get a quick read up on their county's animal disaster response landscape, essentially, they can read these 1 to 2 page reports that we've published on our websites that provide a very general basic history of animal disaster response and what it looks like in your county. Again, the level of veterinary need is a little bit subjective, but what you can do is if you're, again, trying to get a bare minimum understanding of animal disaster response resources within your county, but as well as if you're looking for new ideas of improvement, or if you want to look at other areas and what they may be doing well. Yes, some areas like the major urban populations like San Francisco and Los Angeles may just be inundated with veterinary resources, but in particular, some counties have really good relationships with animal services that have played a routine role in disaster response and providing veterinary care with disaster response. You can look at what some of the CART programs are doing and how they're integrated into emergency services. So again, it's both to understand a little bit more about your local authorities, but as well as being able to look to other counties for new ideas and innovation. Since I've got a couple more minutes, I'll just go through these last little bits of slideshows. We were deployed for 2 weeks to the Park Fire in Butte County last summer, fall. And these are just little slideshows about our disaster response. So you can see here, we were working out of an equestrian park for the large animal disaster shelter. You can see equine horses here. We got lucky, or quote unquote lucky. There was really only one day with significant level of dangerous AQI where we asked our volunteers to wear N95 mask. But you can see we handled a large number of different species. We also got some time in our surgical suite Additionally, both the local CART, the North Valley Animal Disaster Group, as well as the national organization, the ASPCA, came to provide animal care at both shelters. The photo on the right here is a briefing that we held daily with, again, those animal care volunteers, just talking about the veterinary needs and considerations and trying to help promote collaboration on the whole idea of animal disaster response. And to the left, you can see it looks like a dog probably going through burn debridement in one of our veterinary clinics. A small kitten, again, burn paws, some more photos of some of the structures at the large animal shelter. And then additionally with these cages, I don't think we can see, with these kennels, excuse me, I don't think you can see, but there were a few other species there as well as pigs. So just a wide range of species. The next is a little bit of a trigger warning. There are some burn paws in the next slide that I'll show now. But you can see some of these injuries were significant, especially the burns that we were seeing with some of the animals, mainly the goats, the small ruminants, as well as cats, feline animals. You can see some of their paws were burned to the bone, which requires a lot of not necessarily high level of veterinary care, but time consuming burn debridement. And that's a resource we're able to provide to allow local animal services to focus on their day-to-day operations or to manage, together the inundation of animals coming in from an evacuation or a fire. This is a snapshot of our full-time team. It was taken a little while ago, but it gives you an idea. We're roughly a group of 10 with some additional part-time administrative support from the University of California, Davis. And then with that, I'll probably stop sharing my screen. I believe this presentation will be provided. I'd encourage you all to reach out with any questions you may have following this. And I was not able to pay attention to the chat. So Mel, if you can give me any sort of update or if there's any questions, please hop on. I'd be happy to answer here.
Yeah, it looks like, are you only working with the counties, the OAs, or with cities as well?
Yeah, so we've primarily focused on counties as far as outreach and preparedness, but there's no reason why we couldn't work with a city if they're looking for preparedness or in a disaster response as well. So while the majority of our outreach so far, we've been funded in 2021 and a deployable asset since 23. We've primarily focused on county outreach, but certainly would be willing to work with more local authorities.
And kind of pretty much along the same lines, does your team have capability to assist a city with reassessment and adoption of best practices for city-owned large animal and evacuation space?
Yeah, so it sounds like best practices. If you'd like to send more information about what you're thinking about, Thomas, and what the project is, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about it. Because really, while our calling card is to provide veterinary services, we work so closely with these other organizations of animal services, CARTs that can, if it's not a service we can provide, we can point you in the right direction. So providing more information, we can hop on a phone call and I'd be happy to help you out.
Thank you, William. I don't see anything else in the chat. And again, if you want to go ahead and send me the slides, I'll send that out to everybody at the end. Appreciate your time and all the information.
Sure. Thank you all.
Have a good one. Actually, hold on 1 minute. I think we might have a question. Brandy, did you have a question for William?
I did. I'm sorry, William. If we wanted you to do a virtual presentation to a group of emergency managers, do we just reach out to the 844 UCD number, or is there another number that you want us to reach out to?
The best would be an email. That CVET email goes to all of our leadership. Certainly that's an easy task. Again, like we've done today, we've provided this kind of baseline talk a number of times over the past couple of years. And additionally, I haven't mentioned, but another service you all may be interested in, we've, as well as hosted our own exercises, we provided exercise design and development. So whether you're looking for general animal injects to include in your next tabletop exercise to get some involvement from animal services, or whether you'd like a more significant portion played from animal services or animal responders at your next county or city functional exercise, certainly that's something we'd be interested in doing and a service we'd be willing to provide. And also a great time to mention that I should have worked into my presentation is that this costs we're funded out of legislation out of the general fund for the state of California. So all of these services that I'm talking about, our response capabilities as well as our preparedness work, doesn't come with any sort of cost to local authorities.
All right, thank you. And it looks like there's a comment. Thank you for all you do in helping the vulnerable animals during incidents.
Thank you.
Good comment. All right. I
Thank you.
don't see anything else. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, as we move on, our next presentation is going to be in regards to the lithium battery incident. And I have 3 counties that are going to present, also Galloway's fire chief as well. So we'll just start out with the first one, which is San Bernardino County, and that's Crisanta Gonzalez. I see that you were on earlier.
Hi, good morning, everybody. And I'm sorry I did have technical difficulties, so I'll have to forward my infographic to you later, Melanie, and then you can share it with everybody if that's all right. Had to jump on a different computer. Great, thank you. So again, good morning, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to share the significant incident that occurred on July 26, 2024 in San Bernardino County, which was known as the I-15 Baker Hazmat Incident. Our county had the unique privilege of hosting the first ever commercial lithium-ion battery fire igniting on an interstate. So we were the first one to experience that in the nation. This incident presented unique challenges and highlighted the very critical importance of the unified command and interagency coordination and cross-jurisdictional coordination. So some of the highlights of the incident is that it started on July 26, 2024 at approximately 06:36 a.m. It was northbound Interstate 15 between Yermo and Baker. So for any of you who have ever gone to Vegas, leaving Barstow, you go up to the 15. That's one of our lifeline routes for commercial traffic from the ports of Los Angeles, from Long Beach, and the rest of the United States. So you all are aware that's also a very high volume corridor for tourists or residents of California heading to Las Vegas. So to summarize the incident, a flatbed carrying 6 industrial grade batteries, so over 60,000 pounds of lithium in a Connex, it overturned. And initially there was no flames, only smoke and leaking fluids. However, the lithium batteries did ignite at about 11:50 a.m. So some of the immediate impact was that the northbound I-15 was immediately closed. Some traffic where we were able to, some of our partnering agencies redirected it to the I-40, but that led to severe delays. And at the top point of the queue, we had approximately 18,000 vehicles stuck in that queue. So from where the trailer flipped over all the way back into Nevada. So let me jump down to the unique challenges. So this incident was unprecedented. Number one being that it was the first time such a large commercial lithium-ion battery shipment ignited on an interstate, and then several compounded factors compounded to the complexity. So number one, it was in a remote location. Any of you who have been to that part of our county know that it's a stretch of road where there is no way to get off that road. So like most incidents, we never get the incidents, a fire or anything else where there's a lot of ways to get our traffic off the freeway, right? The same scenario for this. There was no ingress or egress off of that freeway, off that interstate. And if you did try to get off, there is sand. So most vehicles are going to get stuck, which became a problem because the shoulders became blocked by non-authorized vehicles, which caused some accidents and caused some hindering of emergency access. Many vehicles and big rigs also became stuck in that soft sand that I was talking about in the center median due to lack of unpaved roads and no turning points. To compound on top of that, we were going through a heat event. So temperatures near Baker were around 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which was leading to numerous heat-related medical calls among the stranded motorists who either lacked air conditioning or they had run out of gas at that point. So they were in their cars in a heat event for multiple days with no air conditioning. And then you have to remember this also happened on, started happening on a Friday that led into the Saturday event. So this also happened when commuters were traveling to Las Vegas for the weekend. Some of the logistical strains, I'd like to go over that with you. There was limited tow truck availability. which led to services for tow trucks being overwhelmed, and they couldn't get to some of the events. And many of the cars on that interstate are also electric vehicles like Tesla. So once they run out of batteries, they cannot just be towed. They have to be picked up and put on the back of a flatbed. So that caused additional logistical issues for our county. Communication was challenging due to a limited cell phone and wireless broadband services in that stretch of road. The gas stations along this I-15, I-40 corridor, they ran out of fuel, causing vehicles to block lanes. Caltrans was able to start, it resorted to delivering fuels to stranded motorists at some point. Some of the motorists that were able to get off were able to go to hotels, but that quickly, those hotels quickly filled to capacity and could not take any more people in. So we still had people sleeping in their cars, even in the parking lots of the hotels that were able to get off the freeway. And then the secondary note, which some of you may or may not know, is that lithium batteries are they're notoriously difficult to extinguish. And this is something we found out during the process, is it takes massive amounts of water to put these fires out. And unfortunately, we were in the middle of a desert, so we didn't have access to massive amounts of water. We basically have to have found a way to safely pick up this Connex container and dump it into hundreds of thousands of gallons of water somehow. That wasn't an option for us. We were out in the middle of the desert. We didn't know what the stability of the lithium Connex was. So the responders at the scene started shifting into a unified command. So I'll go into kind of the command and control and the interagency coordination at this point. So as soon as I was notified, it was still a little, we were still a little unsure of what was happening. Like I said, this had never happened before. So our fire department, San Bernardino County Fire District, got called over for a hazmat to support California Highway Patrol, who was the lead agency. When I started getting phone calls, so we started just monitoring the situation, and then we quickly realized that there wasn't a water plan. Now, at this point, I'm new to this, so I'm making phone calls to my SCE and to my the team here, the Southern California Cal OAS team, to try and get some information and intelligence. They were very, very helpful in connecting me to all the state resources. So we started doing that. We started to bring all the agencies together for situational awareness through our coordination calls. That was federal, state, local. Everybody was jumping on the coordination calls. We started amplifying messaging. We started coordinating with the California Highway Patrol on how we could support distribution of hydration supplies and snacks to stranded motorists. We went to our warehouse. We loaded up those kinds of things, went to the Barstow station at CHP, delivered those to CHP, and because they wanted to make sure that only official vehicles were on the roadway. This is California Highway Patrol. They were the incident commanders, and together with other on-scene agencies, they formed a joint unified command. And the unified command and the on-site agency heads, they worked together to decide the best course of action, and that included the private company who was hauling this lithium container. We were all trying to kind of get together. They were trying to get together out on the scene to figure out what was the safest course of action. They did manage to enforce a closure on the northbound route and provide water and assistance. And then through the unified structure, they got the expert opinions, and they were able to come up with a plan on how to safely move the heated container off into the desert, because there was a large concern for an explosion. So that had to be addressed. San Bernardino County Fire District kind of took the lead in deploying the hazmat team, conducting air monitoring, kind of noting the trace amounts for hydrogen cyanide, chlorine. They managed any fire suppression efforts that might pop up. They pre-positioned ambulances due to delay in travel times, and they also assisted using mutual aid to get the heavy equipment that eventually was used to remove the container off of the highway. Caltrans, California Department of Transportation, also jumped on as part of the coordinating efforts. They managed the freeway closures. They helped amplify the messaging through changeable message signs. They deployed changeable message signs across the region. They provided fuel to the stranded motorists. And so they were instrumental in helping with those aspects. And as I mentioned before, Cal OES was very instrumental in the Southern California region. Sherry's team was very instrumental in helping me get the right people on the coordination calls. So I'm forever grateful for that, because I was probably 11 months into this position. I didn't know a lot of the state leadership. So Sherry's team was great in helping connect those people and get them on the call and get us the resources and the information and the intelligence we need to create an accurate plan. And then at a federal level, we had the U.S. Bureau of Land Management, who monitored the fire's potential spread into the vegetation and also helped us navigate the concerns around the desert tortoise burrows and how we could make sure that we weren't help us mitigate any risks to the desert tortoises. So they were critical in that. So we'll move on to the container movement. The Unified Command coordinated relocating the battery to a minimum safe distance to mitigate public safety risk. Initially, County Fire responded with the coordination of 2 pieces of heavy equipment, and that they were not able to move the battery even a short distance. So two heavy-duty rotator big rig recovery vehicles from Nevada were brought to the scene, which ultimately moved the battery into the desert BLM land. Caltrans supported the effort with the use of a grader to cut a crude makeshift path. So what would happen is the Caltrans grader would blade a short distance, like I believe, if I remember correctly, it was like a foot or so. And then the 2 towers would pull the Connex box inch by inch. So it took a very long time overnight to get that Connex moved, and they had to monitor it for the explosive, possibility explosion. So that was the process. Caltrans would clear the sand, the tow trucks would pull it. Caltrans would clear the sand, the tow trucks would pull it. So that was ultimately how we got it moved out safely into the desert. Operations began to move the container at 2200 hours on July 27th and concluded at 1 a.m. on July 28th. At 1:30, the container was safely moved, considered safe to move off the state highway location, approximately 200 feet from the freeway. And so we were able to begin the process of reopening the freeway. The number 1 northbound lane on I-15 reopened. And by 3:42 in the afternoon, all the other lanes, all the northbound lanes were reopened. Unified Command was demobilized at about 1:30 on the July 28th. And the incident transitioned to recovery effort, which was led by the Office of Fire Marshal Hazardous Materials Division and the BLM Hazmat. They remained on scene at that container location for months. We allowed that container to burn, just to sit out in the desert and burn for months. And so BLM and the Hazmat team had to basically park people around that container for a long time until they deemed it safe to the fire was extinguished enough for them to move it. We had to coordinate with the private carrier insurance for reimbursement of costs spent on the incident. And so it's important to begin that relationship early on and invite them to the conversations early on and invite them to the incident early on if something like this happens in your jurisdiction. And for future planning, Cal OES and other entities are now looking to develop plans for similar events across California and focus on what are the lessons learned here. And since then, I think we've had a couple of other incidents. So they're looking at summarizing kind of what went well, what didn't go well, and how can we focus on faster deployment of resources, and what does that look like when it's interjurisdictional? Since a lot of these are on the state highway, there's a lot of coordination effort with the state. So it's a good conversation that we're having, especially in my county. We have these transportations all the time from the Port of LA through all into the United States. So we're knocking on wood, but don't think that it's going to not happen again. I also wanted to share some of the economic impact for San Bernardino County. So the Economic Development Department for my county was able to provide me with some preliminary data on the economic significance of interstate of I-15 as a trade corridor between Clark County, Nevada, and the entire Southern California. I think this is important to understand because as an emergency manager and from the EM standpoint, we have to think about resiliency and how any incident, whether it's an earthquake or a fire or any kind of disaster, impacts a jurisdiction's economy, and conversely, its ability to come back from the disaster. So we always kind of want to remember in the back of our head, what does that mean in dollars for resiliency? So some of the facts that they were able to share with me, preliminary facts, were that I-15 facilitates over 34.3 billion in annual trade output. Specifically, San Bernardino accounts for 3.3 billion of that total. And this trade supports approximately 166,500 jobs and generates 11 billion in wages annually. Some more facts is the I-15 plays a critical role in freight movement, within Southern California receiving 3.6 billion or 2 million tons of goods. Some of the key trade goods include pharmaceuticals, electronics, and mixed freight. The corridor also supports significant passenger and truck traffic with an average of 37,458 passenger vehicles and 7,459 trucks crossing our Nevada-California border every day. So that's 37.5 cars every single day. And you figure you average about 3 people in a car. It's a significant amount of people that get stranded in that when that 15 shuts down, which is also the main pathway for the San Andreas Fault. You know, lucky me. A major focus of this economic vulnerability that caused by the lane closure was between 2019 and 2024, northbound and southbound closures average over 1,400 weighted hours annually, resulting in an estimated 1.6 billion in lost trade each year. So for this closure, this 44-hour closure due to this battery, it caused a $94 million impact. So this breaks down to $2.5 million per hour, or if it had extended on for an entire month, it would have cost us $1.8 billion if this event hadn't been resolved and it had lasted the month. So in summary, I just wanted to give you some key takeaways. The I-15 Baker Hazmat incident underscores several crucial lessons, the unpredictability of new hazards. So this highlighted the unique challenges of a large-scale unknown that impacted multiple jurisdictions on a transportation route that became, billion with the B, Joseph, that became focused. The Secretary of Transportation was on our call, on the calls as well. So it escalated very quickly. It went from a question mark when I got the first call to something very significant very quickly. Another important thing is the importance of unified command. We had local, county, we had county, state, federal in the unified command, and they work together seamlessly. So those relationships, as we all know as emergency managers, are incredibly important to build before, during, and after the conversation, especially since some of those jurisdictions like Highway Patrol and those kinds of organizations, they tend to promote or rotate. So it's very important that they know who you are and you know who they are. They know what your duty officer's phone number is, so that even if they promote, move on, or get transferred, they can hand that information on to the next person coming down. So building those relationships ahead of time. We do a coffee and conversation about once a month. My team does. We go to the different parts of our county, and so included in those invitations is Highway Patrol and some of our state friends. So I just want to reiterate that it's important before you have to form a unified command to make sure that everybody knows each other. Logistical preparedness for remote incidents. The need for pre-positioned resources has been a struggle and a challenge for us because there isn't really a lot of places to place water along. There's like an airport strip that doesn't get a lot of staffing there. So we're trying to identify how do we strategize some water there. So we're working with maybe Highway Patrol and some other entities to see where's a good place to stage more water there, so that they can just go pick it up and they don't have to wait for us to travel. You have to remember, my county is the largest county in the United States. So for them to ask me for water, I have to take it from Ontario, drive it out to Barstow. So that's a 2-hour drive for them to wait for me to, and then we have to unload it before they can get it out to the incident. So if the incident only takes 5 hours, we've already lost 2 hours time. So we're trying to come up with a better plan for that. And one of the key takeaways was also public information. we were able to get the messaging on the freeways, but it was very difficult to get the messaging to the social media because of those dead zones. So that's something we're trying to understand a little bit better. We're thinking, trying to promote more of the AM radio stations as well, so that we can get that information out on AM radio. So if you are in your car, you can at least turn to that. If you're not able to access social media, or you're not, this wasn't warranted to the level of a WIA, and we don't know how many of those people on that freeway were subscribers to our information, to our app. So we're trying to think of kind of outside of the box thinking, let's get back to basics and use the AM radio station. So we're working on procedures for that as well. So that is my presentation. And again, I apologize that I don't have the graphic to go with it. I will send that out. But the I-15 Baker hazmat incident was complex and challenging, and I'm open to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Crisanta. Let's see here. Chief Tobias, you have a question?
Actually, not really a question, more of a comment. Crisanta, first of all, it was a pleasure working with you on this event, and you did a really, really good job of keeping things organized as we worked through that. Just so that everyone in the audience is aware, this incident stimulated a lot of conversations between the state and DOT in regards to lithium-ion batteries and transport. And although DOT was focused, or has been focused, on lithium-ion battery EV fires, as well as the large EV fires with semi-truck components catching fire, which we've had a few of those as well in California. But the fact of the transport of those BESS battery storage containers and the impacts we've had in multiple locations within our state have become part of the collaborative discussion. And so, having said that, I want to let you know that. And the second thing that you mentioned that is also worthy of bringing up to the group is that there's going to be a conversation in just a minute about the Otay Mesa BESS fire from San Diego. But when you talk about future events possibly occurring, there will be, and already has started for the last couple months, some transportation of D&D, which are destroyed and damaged batteries, from that location to Nevada, utilizing that I-15 corridor. And they've done a lot to render those somewhat safer than a full potential battery being transported, but they are out there, and there is a potential risk with that. And so, once again, Krista, great job, and looking forward to working with you again.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your strong voice and leadership during the meetings. It was incredibly helpful. I appreciate you helping me at the state level. Thank you so much. Oh, I see we have another hand.
Yeah, Larry.
Hey, so Chuck works with me, and I wanted to applaud again your efforts on this, as well as the all the partners, right? So this is going to happen again, and Chuck will allude to that on his presentation. Also, your point about staging water and so forth on that corridor, it's a huge point, because in the middle of our discussions for mass evacuation, for example, and which is another work group that we're part of, we see these unintended consequences like medical emergencies in the middle of a huge evacuation where people are stranded, which easily could be the case there as well as other spots. Also, I think it's a good point that, had we game planned that out a little bit ahead of time, we would have known, now we do know, that there are certain types of heavy equipment you need to get on the road as soon as you get an inkling that something like this is going down and it's stopping a whole huge corridor. So some of the background discussions are, what else can we as the state and local partners put together that would allow that thing to get resolved a lot quicker, those hazards to be moved away from the roadway or other places that will allow the traffic to continue, and how we could do it faster and better. So Chuck alluded to it, it stimulated a lot of good conversation. And, whether it's out in the middle of the desert in the heat or whether it's Mammoth with, 900 inches of snow hitting and people being stranded there and that kind of scenario as well. We have in this state some really challenging conditions to be looking forward to. And I'll leave it at that because Chuck's going to elaborate more on the BESS and lithium ion issues. But it is on everyone's radar screen, and especially when it's that kind of a corridor. The governors, both states, were very keen to make sure we were resolving it as fast as possible. Thanks.
Yeah, we estimated about 3 people per car. So when it peaked at 18,000 cars, we were estimating about 54 to 60,000 people stranded on that corridor at the peak, without anywhere to go. So yeah, it's, getting water, like you said, all those points are excellent points, and conversations have been going on here, as well as to perhaps we need to stage some crates of water bottles with the sheriff's department at their airstrip where their emergency operations is. So maybe they could just load up water on a helicopter and drop it off for the sheriffs to get it. That might be quicker. So we're having those kinds of conversations of what does a rapid deployment look like.
Thank you, Crisanta. I don't see any more questions. So thank you again. And within the same topic, we will move over to San Diego County. I believe it's Chief, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, Twohy.
Yes, hello everyone. Dan Twohy, and I also have Rob Resende and George Fay here with me to present. Let me get this up for us. Hopefully. It looks like it's loading. Okay, is everybody able to see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, so my name is Dan Twohy. I'm a battalion chief for CAL FIRE San Diego County Fire, and I was one of the incident commanders for the Camino incident, which was a very large incident for us, and we had some support from other agencies. Rob, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Rob Resende with San Diego Fire Rescue Battalion Chief. I'm also the Region Alternative Energy Emergency Response Coordinator for the San Diego region.
And George, are you able to jump on?
Yeah, my name is George Fay. I'm with the Hazardous Incident Response Team for the County of San Diego.
So all of us worked really well together to kind of navigate this incident. I'm just going to introduce you all to the incident really quickly and throw it to my partners here to give you some technical knowledge. But this occurred at the Gateway Energy Storage Facility, which is just north of the U.S.-Mexican border in the community of Otay Mesa. And this is a very large facility. And it's when it was built, it was the largest in the world. And its construction really led to some of the challenges we felt. If you notice in the slide there, the fire occurred in Building 3, which was in the middle of the facility itself. So that added to one of the challenges, as we were unable to just allow this to burn. We were faced with the fire extending into a significant amount of lithium-ion batteries. The crews that responded to it knew the facility. It's a high hazard location, so they've toured it many times, as well as responded to incidents. There's been 7 incidents at that facility prior to this, most of them involving the transformers, as you saw in that video. It came across last year on May 15th as a general fire alarm. So a truck and an engine responded. First arriving unit had nothing showing, so they tied in with the facility operator and had the engine hook up to the water source and the sprinkler system, but did not charge it. While they were doing their investigation, the water flow alarm went off, indicating that they did have a fire, and they started a first alarm response to the incident. And they noticed some light white smoke, and smoke's in quotes because quite often it might not actually be traditional smoke, but the electrolytes in the batteries. They also heard some thumping, which was possibly batteries igniting and exploding. So once this was determined that we had an involved battery fire, the choice was made, and it was a very good choice to make this a hazmat incident. We used the resources we had on scene to evacuate the adjacent buildings, create an exclusionary zone, and then really bring in the hazardous incident response team that Rob and George are part of into the command structure. And bringing a hazmat in really was key. This is not something we deal with every day, so having these experts there to help guide us was tremendously helpful. So Rob might be able to get into some of the hazards that we were concerned with and how we dealt with those.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So this facility was approved for construction in 2016 and was completed in 2019. The reason those dates are important is when we look at NFPA 55, which governs the safety and standards of battery energy storage systems, it really didn't come into fruition until 2020. So this facility was built prior and approved prior to a lot of the current safety mechanisms and safety standards that are now prominent on the newer systems. So because of that, this is a dedicated use facility, which is authorized by the fire code. Basically a bunch of batteries racked inside a large Costco-sized warehouse with approximately 10 rows of batteries stacked 2 stories high. And so because of the lack of some of the current safety mechanisms in place, we have a lot of challenges, one of which was no redundancy in power. And so as soon as the power was secured to the building, every sensor and door and anything that was mechanically operated was unable to be operated. It was shut off, and we did not have those resources available to us. And because of that, we weren't 100% sure what the environment inside the structure looked like. And so we needed to do some recon. Having Surprise, Arizona incident in mind, the McKicken incident where firefighters had almost fatal injuries due to an explosion of a battery energy storage system, we decided to utilize unstaffed or basically robotics to go downrange and do some of the initial recon for us. And you can see the robot there has got some atmospheric monitoring onto its arm. Sent the robot in. Bomb squad from San Diego was controlling the robot. We were able to detect high amounts of hydrogen gas inside the structure, which then informed us that, yes, we had battery actively failing. We also had the concern of explosive atmospheres. So we did not send firefighters onto the roof. We did not send firefighters into the structure for approximately 24 hours. We allowed the water application to the batteries to also help ventilate the structure, kind of push the gases out of the structure. And it wasn't until we sent the robots back in to confirm that the hydrogen gas levels had decreased down to non-detect that we sent firefighters in with PPE. So our hazmat team went in, they did some atmospheric monitoring to confirm that the space was in fact no longer explosive. And once that confirmation was done, we were allowed to send the truck crew up to the roof to improve vertical ventilation of the structure, which was done successfully. And so that was those are some of our big concerns. Obviously, I'll let George kind of speak to some of the gases and off gases that we were detecting, but we did establish atmospheric monitoring. The command post was established at a good distance away upwind. So that was all very well done by the incoming crews and the incident command structure. And so everything went about as smoothly as you could possibly have it go, considering the scenario that was given to us.
And so as Rob mentioned, once we determined that explosive environment, we let the building ventilate itself for that 24 hours. And then we were tasked with monitoring this environment. And so George and his team and the Department of Environmental Health really was crucial in that. So I'd like him to talk a little bit about the air monitoring and water runoff monitoring.
One of the challenges with these batteries is we know there's a lot of decomposition gases that come off, but when you review the SDS, a lot of it is a trade secret, so it's kind of hard to predict exactly what we should see. From the lithium-ion battery study we did in San Diego, we know some of the gases that are toxic: hydrogen fluoride, hydrogen cyanide, the carbonates that come off, acetaldehyde, acetylene, formaldehyde. There's all these different toxic gases that we can see. Another issue we have is we don't have any field equipment with telemetry that can detect these gases and quantify them. What we do have is the area array set up. So we establish those on the perimeter back at the command post. And basically the action levels were going to be, if you see any indication on the meter that you're getting any of the gases we're checking for, so LEL, O2, H2S, CO, any VOCs or HCN, that we can just assume there's some of these toxic decomposition gases present. Don SCBAs evacuate the area. We established 24-hour monitoring with a laptop. In order to keep continuity, we did on-site training with the fire personnel there, and then HERT would come in and rehab the equipment, do bump checks daily so that the monitors ran 24 hours a day. One of the critical things that we did early on was communicate to the facility that it was going to be their responsibility to provide the perimeter air monitoring throughout the duration of the incident. It was obvious that this was going to be an extended incident, and we just didn't have the resources to dedicate for 24-hour air monitoring, potentially for weeks at a time. So really having them start early on, no, you guys need to bring in an outside company and do air monitoring for the perimeter was really key. For the water runoff, we did the same thing. There was a lot of water coming through this facility, entering the storm drain. So we established early on, you guys need to minimize the runoff and then characterize any waste generated. One of the biggest concerns was going to be the Title 22 heavy metals from the batteries getting into the water and then going into the stormwater system. It became apparent, though, with the volume of water going through the facility that containment was probably not possible. It went in a storm system, went into multiple retention ponds, and then eventually was threatening to go into Mexico. We had Patriot Environmental collect some samples, and they did 4 sample sites, and then they ran them. If you go to the next slide, Danny. So these are the sample sites, one right at the facility at the storm drain, then where it enters a stormwater conveyance system, and then some retention ponds, and then down at the border. They tested TTLC for the heavy metals, VOCs, oil and grease, total petroleum hydrocarbons, pH. And what we found was that all the samples were below the limits for like a hazardous waste. This was probably contributed just to the sheer volume of water that flowed through the facility. Everything would have been diluted. But you can see that that span is about 2.5 miles, I believe. So the water flowed very far during this incident. But another key piece was making sure that they were responsible for the water testing and characterization of the waste early on in the incident.
And as both gentlemen talked about, we really had to develop a mitigation plan for this incident. So initially, we were cooling the facility with the sprinkler system that was in the building, and that was holding the fire at bay. And we were trying to allow these to slowly burn in a controlled manner until the energy potential was mitigated. That worked for about 2 days. On day 3, we got a significant thermal runaway. The fire ended up transitioning through the roof, and we initiated another large response. It's a first alarm commercial response. So we had 2 of our ladder trucks up applying water. We had large flowing ground monitor systems at the ground, and we were moving about 5,000 gallons of water a minute. And it took us 20 hours of that aggressive firefighting to get that fire under control. So as George mentioned, we had quite the dilution of that. Once we got the fire under control, for the next 2 days, we were able to manage some of the fires that broke out in the batteries through direct water application. We started at the doorways, but weren't able to get into all those racks that Rob mentioned. So we actually opened holes throughout the building to allow for direct water application. That direct water application really kind of knocked down a significant amount of that fire, and we got the building to a point of stabilization. And you can see in the video there, the building itself did fail. We had the roof members come in, and we had a significant fire load, that large firefight. And once we flew a drone into that building, we still determined about 60% of the batteries were still intact. So we still had tremendous energy potential left in that building. So for the remainder of the incident, our goal is to protect the firewalls and keep this fire successfully contained in building 3. We were able to do that with that direct application of water, and then it really became a plan of giving this building back to the building owner. And luckily for us, the building owner was very easy to work with. They did a good job of getting private companies out there to take over the roles and responsibilities, with one big exception that George paid for was they had trouble with the air monitoring, so we put a heavy load on our county hazmat folks. But it took us about 8 days of not observing any fire activity before we determined there was no longer a threat to the public, and released the building back to the property owner on May 31st. So once the building was back to the property owner, that was the end of CAL FIRE County Fire's responsibility day in, day out there. But our challenges haven't ended. We've had a lot of time and work spent there that George and Rob and the EPA have been working on. George, do you want to talk about this next section?
So right now we're in the battery recovery phase. There's pretty much like 3 different waste streams kind of going on. So there's the intact batteries that have some water impact to them, maybe some heat impact, but they were able to be discharged. So all of those got shipped out as DDR to a recycler. The packaging they went with was these wood crates, which were compliant with the 49 CFR code for shipping DDR lithium-ion batteries. One of the early, hazards we kind of noted in the beginning was you're going to pack a truck full of damaged lithium-ion batteries and wood crates, and you're going to ship it to Nevada. We just discussed this in the last presentation about the danger of putting these on the road. So making sure, the agencies along the route were aware of what was coming through and that there was monitoring done. They were put on the truck and then allowed to sit for 24 hours, check for hydrogen production. The next group is the fire impacted batteries, the ones that were burned. The facilities kind of got 2 methods going. So one is a salt solution discharge, which we've seen in other incidences like Maui. They're using a 7% sodium sulfate solution. They soak for 3 days and then dry for 7. They chose that because it allows for discharge, but it wasn't too corrosive for like the anode and cathode terminals. The other method they're using is a cryo freezing and shredding, which is kind of a brand new process. Basically, they freeze the battery with liquid nitrogen, then it goes into a shredder, and then that goes into a neutralization solution. The idea being the battery is so cold that it kind of delays the chemical reaction during the shredding, so you don't have that big release of energy. All of this is kind of being developed and changed in real time as we review the plan. They do some testing, we see hazards, and then we make adjustments. So while they have both of these in place to do, they might switch from one to the other. It kind of changes as they go. And then the last is the burn batteries. So that's the ones that are completely burned up with the rest of the debris. The concern there is all the fine heavy metal particulates, with their PPE. Reviewing, is it just enough to have like a P100 mask, or are the particles so fine that they might make it through that filter? These are all the things that we've considered as they go through this recovery process. We want to make sure the employees on site are protected as well.
Hey, George, I think a couple of things that are important to bring up here is, one, the partnership with the EPA and the importance of bringing in the both Fed EPA and Cal EPA to these types of events early as part of Unified Command. They really allow for certain operations that would never be allowed without their presence. For example, the processing of hazardous materials on site is something that only the Fed EPA has the authority to waive some of those restrictive regulatory frameworks. So I think that's really important for everybody to think about bringing that group early on to these incidents. And then the other thing I'd like to throw out is that cryo freezing and shredding process right now, it's just written on paper. It actually hasn't happened. So we haven't really tested it out to see how successful it is. As George says, we're kind of updating and changing as we go, but just for everybody's info, that cryo freezing process is not actually started yet.
So ongoing challenges, they've had some thermal runaway events since the main incident occurred. So some batteries have shown elevated temperature or off-gassing. The facility has private contracted hazmat firefighting teams there that handle those incidences as they occur. So there still are batteries that are showing like kind of thermal runaway activity well after the main incident had stopped. Employee safety, one of the things that the EPA wanted to establish early on is that all the employees that are doing the recovery process are HAZWOPER compliant and that they're wearing the PPE they need to. There's early discussions of normally when we handle a battery that's been impacted, turnouts SCBAs is our SOG. Is that feasible to have someone in that type of PPE working an 8-hour shift, making sure at least that they have something that's going to protect them if an incident does occur. The transportation safety of transporting these, so the ones that were just DDR, but even these ones that have been brined and will be put in steel drums and shipped, making sure that they're checking for hydrogen production or any signs of possible thermal runaway while these are being shipped so we don't have an incident on a road. And then again, like we've talked about, this is all new. So this is a new process. It's not something where there's any precedent at another facility that they can kind of see what went right and what went wrong. We're kind of developing this. Like Rob said, the EPA being a vital member of this recovery process to make sure that everything's done safely and meeting the regulations for disposal for these.
And George, I also want to highlight there on the last slide, the need to be a HAZWOPER certified or HAZWOPER compliant when you're operating in these environments. And so I think that's a really important thing to note as well, is when you're dealing with lithium-ion battery failures, you're dealing with a hazardous atmosphere, which falls under the hazardous materials response criteria. And everybody who is working, including contractors and other folks around those areas, really by OSHA standards should be at a minimum HAZWOPER compliant or a firefighter FRO or a hazmat technician. And so it's really important that we don't just allow any contractors to start engaging in this type of work without knowing that they are certified to do it and have the right certification for PPE utilization, including, fit testing and things like that.
Now that I put up the last slide, if anyone's interested, the QR code will lead you to the incident review that will go into much more detail about the incident. Couple things that I'd like to share with the group that really helped make this a fairly successful incident was cooperation and working with our team members. So bringing in the HURT team, the Hazardous Incident Response team, bringing in that subject matter expert, which is Rob out there, really allowed us to develop a strategy that safely mitigated this issue. It really was a very challenging issue. Having good cooperation with the building owners was huge because the fire department or any of your government services really cannot be expected to hold on to this incident for its duration. These batteries have a very long time until they're damaged, destroyed, and recycled. So having that plan ahead of time, working with your facilities where they have contractors that can step in and pull the government resources out is really helpful.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, for that. Does anybody have any questions before we move over to Monterey County? I'm not seeing any. Let me just check the chat real quick. While I'm doing that, Kelsey, are you on?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, we can go ahead to your presentation. Actually, Larry, did you have a question before we move on?
Just quick point to Rob and the group. When we we hear the term about basically, secrets by the industry, where it sounds like they're not willing to tell us exactly what materials it is that they're using and how our firefighters and others are being exposed to whatever it is. Does that strike you as something that needs to be addressed across the board for the future as these hazards continue to arise?
I can speak to, well, obviously we want to know everything, but I think it's going to be very difficult to require the disclosure of, trade secrets within the industry. I think that the bigger thing, which I think they do an okay job of, is to include the potential exposure hazards, and maybe not necessarily providing the total chemistry breakdown of each battery, but at least providing what potential, potential exposures may be present in an SDS is beneficial. I think they do an okay job of that. Maybe they could be a little bit better, but I don't see the disclosure of the trade secrets within the chemistry of a battery being disclosed. I don't know what George thinks on that.
Yeah, no, as long as they include the hazards, I mean, that's what we're mostly concerned with. And also the decomposition gases, it's even from if you knew the chemistry you're starting with, it's still difficult to predict what you're going to end up with after the thermal runaway event.
Yeah, so, I mean, it sounds like there's a level of trust that we find ourselves having to rely on, trust of the industry to be honest about some of the things that we've encountered in the past that may not have led to that level of trust in some other situations. So it just kind of, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, is there legislation that should be looked at for something like that to make sure we're protected in the long run? And then finally, we've discussed, I know at the Fire Scope Hazmat subcommittee and so forth, about the costs of these emerging hazards that, frankly, the fire service really wasn't warned about ahead of time. And we've been discussing, the option of, well, is there a point at which the state or even federally they talk about an excise tax of some type or a hazard tax to help the fire service and the other responders address the financial impacts of these emerging, industry hazards that they're making a profit on, but it's cutting out a big chunk of fire department budgets and so forth in some cases. So I know we're not going to fix that today. It's just a sidebar discussion that I know we've been bantering around with.
I think that would be useful.
Yeah, I think certainly there's a precedent for that, right? When we're looking at things like mercury response, for example, Superfund, all of that is not new. It would just be kind of including these lithium-ion batteries as part of that Superfund type concept.
I think one of the struggles that we're faced with right now is for debris removal, the tonnage that's anticipated to be on county roads. There's really no mechanism for us now that US EPA has taken over the cleanup to actually somewhat force the hand of the ISO to repair the roads after they have significant truckloads going through. So wear and tear on the roads. So it wouldn't just be response, but hopefully recovery as well that you're considering.
I would think the whole package is something we need to start looking at because, as we all know, this is
you're on the wrong one.
Something we'll see more and more.
All right. Kelsey, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you if you want to go ahead and share your screen if you had anything to share, and then we'll go with your presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, just want to shout out to my colleagues in San Bernardino County and San Diego County.
I do want to just preface this with I do not have a fire background. So the very lovely and technical presentation that you received from San Diego will look a little bit different from the EM perspective. Can you guys see my screen? I'm going to assume that's yes. So I am providing an incident overview and update to where we're at in the recovery process for the Moss 300 best structure fire and hazmat incident in Moss Landing, California. So the incident began on January 16th amidst the LA fires. So I think we saw a lot less resources from the state than my colleagues did, predominantly because of the fires that were occurring in the Palisades area. But essentially the active fire was a little over a month long. This was a 300 megawatt phase 1 facility at our Moss Landing power plant, which was repurposed after I think like the 50s. And in 2023 at the time was the largest BESS facility, which was surpassed in 2024 and 2025. So certainly not new necessarily, but this was the world's largest BESS facility fire to date. I'm not going to get too much into this other than there was a flare up, which we'll talk about later. But this is an environmentally sensitive area on the coastline with one of our 2 major thoroughfares or arterial transportation routes from north to south in Monterey County and surrounded by the Elkhorn Slough Preserve. And otters, just all the otters. I'm not going to get too much into this because we don't have enough time, but essentially the fire started at 3 p.m. By like 3:30, our office was on scene. We did not have a robot to send into the fire first. And you can see right here, the first ICP was located next to the Moss 300 structure, which is only one building of the larger plant. About 2 hours in, that ICP had to be relocated once the structure was under full conflagration. Our EOC was activated about 3 hours after the incident began. Our first initial alert to the community was about 2 hours into the event. And it really escalated quickly. By, I think, 6:30 p.m. evacuation orders had been issued. And notice for school closures for the next day had also been issued. Fire suppression, and I know that this is somewhat controversial, but so the batteries in each rack, it's about 20 modules, and each module has its own internal sprinkler system. And then within the larger structure, there was a fire suppression system. And so the intention is such that if you have one battery overheating, you can kind of target that cell before it gets to thermal runaway and triggers a chain reaction on that rack. By the time we got there, there were about 3 or 4 stacks on fire, and the internal sprinkler systems weren't effective. And the amount of heat generated from the fire actually caused the overhead sprinkler suppression system to go off, which invariably compromised the remaining batteries and led to full thermal runaway and combustion of the facility. And with the amount of water dumped onto the batteries and the heat, the roof collapsed essentially, which is kind of where things went not great. I apologize for being so flippant. This is gallows humor. But essentially what we learned is that because of the massive amount of water that would have been required next to a sensitive area, our most effective strategy was to just let it burn itself out once the structure collapsed. And this did a lot of things. Actually, it allowed for the inevitable to happen, which was essentially there's no real containing it. But letting it burn out faster instead of continually trying to fight it for the next 6 months was our best course of action. And so what would have been like a 6 to 7 month firefight was reduced down to a month. And And ultimately, what we were able to avoid was a massive hazmat incident with the toxic runoff going into the preserve at the Elkhorn Slough and then into the ocean. And so there were a lot of mostly pros, a couple of cons to this. The main con was seeing that significant plume that impacted 3 or 4 counties beyond the Monterey County border, and also the loss of public confidence in firefighting activities. And it's been a really difficult, I think, cultural concept that sometimes fighting the fire, the best strategy for fighting the fire is not fighting the fire. And this was somewhat reiterated at the fire symposium that occurred a couple weeks ago. Day 2, we eventually lifted the evacuation orders once we had a clear understanding that there was not a significant threat of HF to the surrounding community. On day 1, US EPA arrived on site, and I'll talk a little bit more about air monitoring later. But essentially from like the first 8 hours, within the first 8 hours, US EPA was on site to corroborate some of the data that the independent contractor from Vistra had been collecting. We did a lot of things, a lot of community outreach. One of the more important things that our office did was we submitted a MRR, or an MRT, excuse me, to the state for a health assessment team. Essentially, the monitors, I think there were, let's see, 100 mobile air monitoring locations, pulling data, I think it was every 6 seconds for several days on end, and it was an exhaustive amount of data that we couldn't interpret. And so the health assessment team has been able to help us analyze and clean the data for public consumption. But essentially, this resulted in about 1,200 people evacuated for 24 hours. We had 37 shelter guests, about 120 disaster service workers in the EOC and out in the field, hundreds of public phone calls, and 12 emergency alerts disseminated. A shocking amount of media attention, as I'm sure you're all aware. Upon arriving actually at the facility, it was difficult to even enter because there were media just blocking the entrance, which kind of goes to show you just how, I think part of it was also the novelty of the size of the fire and that you could see it from every direction in like a 20-mile radius. And so it just naturally drew a lot of attention, both from the public and from the media. As I had said, we were monitoring the air almost immediately once the incident started. And there were no detections of HF in a significant amount beyond the fence line. As I had said, the health assessment team consists of mostly state agencies, but they were also the ones to request support from US EPA. And so they've been doing ongoing air monitoring, drinking water sampling and testing, dust and soil sampling and testing. They've published some FAQs that have been helpful and helped with publishing a lot of health data related to the incident on our incident webpage. We also had a lot of active community members who wanted to participate in the sampling process, and we appreciate their passion. And so they also provided their sampling, as well as some universities decided to self-deploy and publish their results without peer review. And so essentially we decided to create a community sampling plan around the area, which has resulted in this super fun Moss Landing Vistra battery fire dashboard. And this dashboard is a collection of every single data point, either by the responsible parties, third-party contractor, the state, the county, local universities, and community sampling groups all collated into one dashboard that's interactive by date, time, location, and criteria. We also did a public health survey, which I don't know, I'm still on the fence about this one, but our health team and our PIOs felt it was important. A manner in which we collected, I don't know if it was effective necessarily, but essentially it was a destination for people to share their health impacts with the county. And I'll just leave it at that. So recovery is the somewhat where we're at right now. After the fire, we determined that there were approximately 55% of the batteries that were actually damaged within the structure, which was a total of approximately 100,000 battery modules, estimated about 16 million pounds of battery material. One of our chief issues right now is this wall that you see that's partially standing is structurally unstable. And then there's a basement to this floor as well with batteries underneath it, and that we haven't been able to find or see the extent to which they're actually destroyed. And so it's just kind of this, I think, booby trap of debris, essentially. And so what we're looking at now is delinking the batteries, or we've completed delinking the batteries that could be accessed. They're trying to assess the remaining batteries. I'll talk a little bit about the CERCLA agreement, but essentially right now they're looking to stabilize the structure before moving the batteries out, and assessing what's underneath. And then once the structure is stabilized, they'll remove the batteries and begin staging them on site within the fence line for de-energization, for treatment, and then packaging, transport, and disposal. And so they're looking at the salt brining options as well as the grinding and shredding options before transport. There's some batteries that don't need much treatment other than de-energization, but they were looking at a variety of options for removal of the batteries in terms of transportation. And essentially all the debris at this juncture is planned to go to Nevada and some other sites that have yet to be determined. But we had a lot of trouble with explaining the recovery process to the community. There wasn't something that was clearly outlined like you would see with a PPDR program. And so we essentially presented this to the public as what is likely to occur pending, any significant changes. But the main priority was to mitigate the battery hazards and the structural hazards before demolition and removal of the structure, and then, of course, clean up confirmation. And so this is a fun little graphic that we've been sharing. I think we've been getting a lot of pressure from elected officials asking why the batteries haven't been removed yet. And it's been difficult to explain that we're 1 to 2 years out from completion. But this graphic has been really helpful for them to understand that there's a lot of moving parts that are occurring simultaneously, and there's a lot of stopping and going. There's a lot of pre-planning. There's a lot of pivoting occurring as we're learning more and more information about what's in the building. As I had mentioned, delinking is complete, and now we are on to planning for battery removal and staging and structure stabilization. So the US EPA has entered into what's called a CERCLA, Administrative Settlement Agreement and Order on Consent. And I just want to clarify that this is not considered a Superfund site. They fully anticipate remediating the entirety of the structural debris and battery debris within the fence line. And it's a legal agreement between the responsible party and the US EPA outlining who has the responsibility for removal of debris, and the US EPA's authority to abate should they not do it in a fashion that was expected and compliant with state and federal regulations. For instance, they had indicated that had this been in Texas, they probably would have just buried the debris, which clearly is unacceptable. And in this county, and I presume state. And so Vistra is submitting their comprehensive plans and safety protocols to the US EPA for review prior to all of the future activities occurring on site. And they're providing continuous air monitoring and sampling. And there is a private firefighting company on site. We have a couple of incident web pages, one with all the health data and then one for the debris, which will now be, actually the site is going to be decommissioned shortly because the US EPA started one once the circular agreement was signed. So some of our action items right now are, we are creating emergency action plan guidelines for ISOs to submit through our clearinghouse process, which we did not have one. So invariably we had 10 different versions of the same plan floating around, and wildly insufficient plume modeling. That was quite comical after the event. We had asked for catastrophic scenario modeling prior to this event occurring, and they essentially gaslit us and told us it wasn't possible. And so we're having all of our ISOs redo their plume modeling and providing plume modeling guidelines as well as EAP guidelines. I think that was another issue, is each of the EAPs basically said call 911, which is so helpful. And then we're also working on standardizing emergency levels of to help provide clarification as to what's occurring on site, and really defining those emergency levels. We're also looking at community sampling and general environmental sampling and monitoring requirements at each site. So I think at the onset of the incident, there was no on-site air monitoring other than the handheld devices. So making mobile and stationary monitoring options available at the site, but also looking at baseline sampling requirements throughout the community prior to approving permits and EAPs. Because invariably what's happened is we now have a bunch of community samples with no baseline to compare it to. So it's difficult to understand if what we're seeing in the community was actually occurring prior to the incident or a result of the incident. And then our wildfire evacuation zones were insufficient essentially for effectively alerting and mobilizing the community. And so we are reevaluating our zone strategy and reevaluating our emergency alerting and public information strategy, which had a lot of areas of improvement. It's kind of the short of the long. And so I will leave that at that because it's 11:48. I am planning on submitting this to CISA to present next spring. And I'm hoping to dive into this a bit more about lessons learned and recommendations for our local partners. But I think the big thing for you guys is once we're done with our EAP guidelines, we'll send it out or have it on our website and people can kind of replace Monterey County with whatever jurisdiction name is in there. I think it's been frustrating for us to not have a federal or local standard for BESS EAPs.
All right, thank you, Kelsey. For the sake of time, we'll take the 2 questions and then I'll give Chief Tobias a little bit of time as well. Robert, you're first.
Yeah, just a quick question. You mentioned there was no HF detected outside the fence line. What was detected within the fence line? Do you have a value for that, if any?
I don't have that readily available for you, but I can send you the link. There were nominal, I think, burps of HF. But right now we're assessing whether or not that data collection was correct or if it was a device error.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Kelsey. We'll go over to Chief Tobias. You had a little bit of time. And did you have a question for Kelsey as well?
Yeah, well, actually just comment. Kelsey, it was great working with you through this process. And one of the things that I think is really important, I think, for the audience to recognize, and it's similar for all 3 of the events that the case studies that have been presented is that reaching out real early for subject matter expertise and assistance is critical to success. And so I know that the incident commanders and chief officers were on the phone with me almost immediately when they arrived on scene for this event, which was allowing them to get solid information in regards to actions to take and things to consider when they were making those command level decisions. Also being able to assist with the environmental portions of it and setting up for that recovery process early on and making the proper notifications, I think was really important. So Kelsey, you guys did a really good job with this event. It could have certainly been a whole lot worse than it turned out.
I concur, and I appreciate that.
I'm going to go ahead and load up or share my screen for this last portion. We'll try to summarize some things and go over just real quickly a couple other of case studies very, very quickly. And so hopefully you should be able to see the screen now. And so I'm going to see how well it goes. So there's a number of different courses that we've presented over the course of the last few years, and I want to thank the other presenters. They did a wonderful job, and also some of the individuals that you heard from are those subject matter experts that we work with on a regular basis that truly know how to address these issues. And so, having said that, real quickly, lithium-ion battery impacts have been increasing throughout the state of California for the last couple of years. Most recently, the wildland urban conflagration that we had in Los Angeles was just another incident that we'll cover just very briefly of the potential impacts due to this. It's still an emerging threat, although there are other emerging threats that are also coming. The infrastructure impacts that we've had because of these events, some of them you've already heard about earlier today. So the road closures that have occurred, we've closed down a port, which we'll discuss a little bit briefly. We've shut down rail lines. All of those are very costly to our economies and to commerce within the state of California. And they recognize, as mentioned earlier in some of these presentations, millions and billions of dollars of economic impacts because of these events. Some of the things that we've discussed, just to recap it real quickly, is that the release of toxins from these fires are toxic, they're explosive, they're flammable, they're corrosive. They do have potential impacts to the environment, but more importantly, they have significant impacts to the responders and the public. And I've listed a couple of the different gases, and these are just some of them that are released out there. The one that we don't talk about as much are the toxic heavy metals that are released, which are also cancer-causing, and we don't have firm grasp on how bad that impact is as of yet. But most recently, we've had incidents that we've been monitoring or that have occurred, and one of them in Spain was caused by lithium-ion batteries in a parking garage with a subsequent explosion and inhalation issue that created the fatality of 2 firefighters. Significant. In Sacramento here in the state, we've also had an incident most recently that injured 5 firefighters. 3 of them are still off work and may never return to work due to the inhalation hazard from being downwind from a lithium-ion battery fire. As mentioned earlier, these thermal runaways, I think in San Diego, Georgia had spoken about how the thermal runaway occurred. We're talking weeks and months later from when the initial event occurs. And when that does happen, there's always a reignition potential that can occur. We've talked about from what occurred out in the desert, those water supply needs or lack of water to be able to address these issues. These structures are developed so that they prevent water from getting into the batteries, because that causes potential for thermal runaway. And so they're built with difficulty getting water in, which means it's more challenging for firefighters to try to extinguish these types of fires. And then, of course, the heavy equipment needs that we have to try to move the impacted vessels from their locations and render them into areas where it's a little bit safer has become a major concern for local jurisdictions. All of you that are involved with emergency management need to be considering those types of impacts. So the reason why Moss Landing didn't receive the support and or recognition early on for what occurred out there was because we were knee deep in the middle of fighting fires in Southern California, which started just a little over a week prior to when Moss Landing occurred. And so recapping that, on January 7th, we had a fire that occurred in Southern California, multiple fires actually, with hurricane force winds that were blowing through there. And so we had major urban conflagrations that occurred in a couple of different locations and jurisdictions, one in LA County, one in LA City, that presented with a heavy life loss and significant property loss for those areas. For you emergency managers, this resulted in EMAC resources from other states. We had international resources coming in to provide support. They opened up the emergency operations centers in multiple areas, as well as the state operations center, and incident management teams from CAL FIRE were all over the Southern California area managing the multiple fires that had occurred due to this major wind event. We had multiple hazmat missions that were going on simultaneously. So we had some that were supporting a human remains mission over in the Eaton and Palisades fires, where a number of fatalities had occurred, as well as we ended up with lithium-ion battery missions that had occurred. And it was the first time in the state of California we actually deployed hazmat resources into an urban conflagration or a wildland event to address a hazmat-related impact. And so the lithium-ion batteries presented that for us. In addressing those lithium-ion battery issues down in Southern California, the hazmat teams were out there locating where the hazards were. They were mitigating some hazards that occurred out there. They were flagging those hazards for the EPA to assist them in their mission, as well as the safety of responders that were working in those areas. And then they were putting all that information on the maps so that they could get back to those informations and prioritize areas that needed to be addressed later on some type of a mapping program. They addressed over 400 hazardous materials sites. The teams that were actively working, they utilized the SIRS data that you all have access to identify additional sites that were potentially impacted. They were heavily involved in battery wall, lithium-ion battery walls, and electric vehicles that were being addressed and rendered somewhat safe. They had numerous calls for service out there, as well as they were on standby during the repopulation that had occurred at the Palisades fire. These were all really significant issues that you need to consider out there when you're addressing these types of issues, because this will occur again. I mean, although we had it for the very first time in Southern California, we can anticipate having this happen more and more again every time we have a wildland related event that impacts communities. The personnel were also assigned to assist the Joint Field Office in regards to providing support for multiple fires, and we had agency reps from Cal OES that were integrated into that type of response. And I should say that getting those teams in there early allowed the US EPA and the Corps of Engineers to start their work earlier in regards to allowing not just the repopulation, which was being directed more by the politics that were involved, but also supporting their mission to complete phase one efforts for recovery and removal of those hazardous materials quicker than they've ever done before in the nation. So in less than 30 days, they completed the phase one efforts, which would normally have taken months to complete. So we did shorten their mission by having hazmat teams out there. And I bring this up because reaching out early to your subject matter experts and to the resources that are out there to get those right individuals on the ground supporting the mission allows us to complete the response and recovery efforts much quicker. And we did have down in Southern California over 1 million pounds of batteries, and we're probably going to see more of that, more than that, when we start really getting all the numbers in for the Moss Landing event. So the reason why this is important for you is it increases responder safety. Responder safety in wildland events, those firefighters that are out there fighting wildland, firefighters tend not to wear respiratory protection. They have fairly lightweight protective equipment that's out there. The toxic heavy metals that they're exposed to can present with inhalation hazards for them, as well as contaminating their all of their gear, whether it's the rolling stock, fire engines, and other pieces of equipment that are out there, or the clothing that they wear when they respond to those types of events. But also it impacts the civilian safety. So we need to recognize that anytime that civilians are in areas where these events have occurred, there's also potential there for toxic heavy metal inhalation injuries to occur for them once they're allowed to start reentering or repopulating those areas. So getting the right resources out there to do air monitoring quickly before some of that occurs can be critically important to their safety as well. We look at that in the past, we've always looked at things as you get through response, and then when you're all done with response, we start recovery, and those are integrated. We need to get recovery efforts started while response is going on, and although we teach that, we need to actually apply that in real world responses. And so some of the issues that we've had when we looked at Palisades and Eaton for those fires, as well as some of the other wildland events that occurred in January into February of this year, those are small in comparison to what could occur when we have a large-scale earthquake. So whether it's in Northern California or Southern California, a large-scale disaster from an earthquake can cause those to be smaller events of what we could be experiencing. And we really need to get this right now before we have the large-scale event. And part of that is educating our incident management teams and our local governments in regards to the true hazards that exist out there, so that you that are listening to this call and those that you communicate with on a regular basis are sharing the message that, you know what, we have new emerging threats out there, and we need to change the way that we do business, and we need to get additional resources on scene to properly manage and mitigate those types of events. If we don't do that, we're destined to have additional failure. The other event that's worth noting very quickly was the Seaside event in Southern California that shut down a portion of the Port of LA for almost 2 days, which was due to another BESS fire, very similar to what we saw at the I-15 event, where a top-heavy tractor trailer rig transporting a BESS unit tipped over. When it did, it went into thermal runaway, and initially it was an explosion and fire that occurred. It did shut down that Port of LA, or a portion of it, for 2 days, and it happened to be right on a bridge, the Vincent Thomas Bridge, which connects Terminal Island to the mainland, was impacted by it. This was $1 billion event, gang. We're talking about a major economic issue, as well as you can think about what it did to commerce when you shut down that port and all of the resources and stuff that did not get delivered where it was supposed to and be transported to other locations, just like it did in I-15 with all of the tractor trailers that were stranded on the roadways. So some of the last things that I wanted to bring up to you is that we have a lot of state legislation that's going on out there that are helping to address these issues. So we have Senate bills and Assembly bills that are going out there that deal specifically with lithium-ion batteries and toxic heavy metal. And although they're still passing through those legislative branches right now, we're already looking at different task forces that are being formed to try to come up with plans on how to address this emerging threat. But this isn't the only emerging threat. So Rob Rezendi, who is running a lot of these issues in Southern California, down in San Diego, can attest to some of the other issues that are occurring and coming forward with us. And so we've got CNG and hydrogen fuel releases or fuel potential out there as well. And those alternative fuels that exist out there are going to present with additional hazards and threats that we need to address with. And we've already had fatalities to responders due to these types of events. So we've also written some white papers that are going forth into educating state legislators in regards to lithium-ion batteries, as well as some other issues that we've recently seen. And the last thing I'd like to bring up with is that there was a study done by Los Angeles Times that showed the impacts to emergency responders from out of the area that came into Southern California to help combat those fires, and the higher levels of heavy metal toxins that they found in their bloodstream. And so this is a real issue, gang. It's one that's not going to go away soon, and it presents with significant hazards both to the responders and to the public. Now, I covered that really quickly because I know we're really short on time, but if you need to reach out and get additional information, you can contact myself or John Woody from Cal OES. You can reach out to Rob, Rezendi, Chris Myers. There's a number of subject matter experts that are out there that can provide assistance to you and help educate you a little bit more to these hazards. We've integrated very well for these collaborative relationships. And so we look forward to hearing back from you, down the road. I think this is really important information to share with all those responders. And having said that, I'm going to go ahead and mute, and we'll take any questions. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you, Chief Tobias. For the sake of time, if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and email Chief Tobias. And I will also, if everybody that presented today can email me their presentations, and I'll make sure to get that out to everybody that's been on the call. And I know we had one last person with Cal OES Crisis Communication, and it's going to be Corbin. And I know there's just one slide, just for the sake of time, Corbin, if you're still on, if you want to go ahead and put that up, and then we'll go ahead and close out. I know everybody wants to get to lunch.
Yeah, hi everyone.
Could barely hear you, Corbin. Are you there?
Can you hear me now? Oh, no.
No, not really.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Nope. Hello?
There we go. That's much better.
That's better. That's better. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'll just
Thank
run
you.
through this really quickly. A little bit about, let's see. Let me try to share my screen real quick. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm unable to share my screen, but I'll just go over, I'll make sure to send the slides. So a little bit about what I'm speaking about today is the Reduce the Risk campaign. And so the Reduce the Risk campaign is a initiative by Cal OES, Office of Crisis Communications and Public Affairs, to help Californians use protection orders to prevent gun violence. And so each year, over 3,000 Californians die from gun violence. And this includes suicide, domestic violence, mass shootings, and primarily, ethnic communities are most often affected, and public awareness of these gun violence protection orders remains low. And so the Reduce the Risk campaign is a gun violence prevention campaign launched by OES that promotes the awareness of 9 types of civil protection orders. And so that can be anything from gun violence restraining orders, domestic violence restraining orders. And what these do is these orders allow concerned individuals, including family members, teachers, and coworkers, to act when they see red flags. And it's about stepping in before someone gets hurt. And so some of the goals of the campaign are to increase awareness of protection orders, to educate the public and professionals about how to use them, how to encourage early action to prevent gun violence, and to prioritize outreach to high-risk communities. And, we are reaching out to training professionals, including law enforcement, attorneys, court staff, behavioral health providers, and public health officials, so they know when and how to use these orders effectively. There's a couple of tools that are available to use. One is reducetherisk.ca.gov. There's multilingual education in over 14 languages, and there's also an interactive tool for filing protection orders. There's also a social media and video content available, and that reducetherisk.ca.gov is kind of the central hub for this campaign information. The site is currently being built out right now, but eventually we'll have an interactive zip code-based protection order filing tool, which can help people find out how to file a protection order that may apply to their situation. It also has those downloadable resources that I was speaking about earlier. Currently, there are statewide trainings underway. We are coordinating training statewide in each of the counties, and each of the 58 counties will be reached by the end of 2026. And so we're working with law enforcement attorneys, behavioral health providers, and public health departments to first really educate those who could focus on the practical implementation of how to file these and who can petition and what do these kind of processes of these gun violence restraining orders look like. And we're starting with counties that historically have a fewer GVRO filings, but again, like I said, we're going to try to reach all 58 by the end of 2026. And so how can you support the effort? Share campaign materials. You can help promote local trainings in your area. There's also, you can stay engaged and sign up. You can also visit reducetherisk.ca.gov. And if you or your organization have any questions or anything that we can help answer, please feel free to email us at reducetherisk@caloes.ca.gov. Your role as an emergency manager in local government is essential to ensuring that we can get these life-saving tools to reach people who need them. And so in the sake of time, thank you. And again, I'll put the email in the chat and I'll make sure we can get you all the slides.
Thank you, Corbin. I appreciate it. Don't see anything in the chat. I know we've gone a little bit over time, but if anybody has any questions, you can email Corbin directly. And again, I will be sending out all of the PowerPoints from today's presentations. Let's see here, for closing questions, does anybody have any closing comments, questions, concerns for the good of the order? Check the chat. I'm not seeing anything. All right, I'm sorry that we went a little bit over today, everyone. Our next statewide MARAC will be on November the 3rd. Hope everybody has a great week and we will see you in November.